Good evening and welcome to this evening's City Council meeting for Monday, April 20th, 2020. This meeting is held being video conference in accordance with requirements of the Iowa Open Meetings Law as determined by the Iowa Public Information Board in response to the Governor's Public Emergency Proclamation. So that being said, I will call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Miller.
Here.
DeVore.
Here.
Bruce.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Dara.
Here.
Sires. Sires. I can see his name up.
He might be muted. I saw him a little bit ago.
Okay, yes, he's on, but and his camera is on. He's just got no sound just yet.
Yeah. Tiber.
Here.
All right, we'll say that all members are present.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for April 6th. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been motioned and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. So it moves us to agenda revisions. Are there any agenda revisions tonight, Madam Clerk?
I have no agenda revisions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. First item is a special order of business. This is item 2 on our agenda sheet. Continuation of the public hearing on the proposed vacation and dedication of a storm sewer easement on the northeast corner property located at 312 West First Street. I will open it up if Karen Howard has any additional comments that she'd like to add on from last time.
Just that this is an easement at the corner of First and Clay Street. Community Bank and Trust has asked to vacate a portion of that easement. The city would retain then a 20-foot easement for the storm sewer at the corner. This is in order for the bank to be able to build a new building in the future. They would vacate a portion of that easement.
Okay, thank you. I'll now open it up to public comments. I'm going to go over to our attendees list, and if you have hands or if you have a question or comment, feel free to do the raise hand icon at the bottom. If you're calling in, press *9, and I'll know that you want to speak on this item. Give that a moment here. Okay, seeing none, I will close this for public comment. That will bring us to item 3, which is a resolution approving and authorizing vacation and dedication of this storm sewer easement. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. So moved.
A motion and seconded. Is there any council discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, this will require a roll call vote. So, Madam Clerk?
Miller.
Aye.
DeVore.
Aye.
Bruce.
Aye.
Harding.
Aye.
Dara.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye, I'm here again.
Yep. Tiber.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us to the next item, which is number 4. Public hearing on the proposed plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the Cedar Falls Recreation Center locker rooms renovation project.
Move to receive and file proof of publication.
Thank you,
Second.
Councilor. So motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Are there any written communications filed with the city clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll now turn it over to Jamie Castle of City Inspections for staff comments on this item, if desired.
Yeah, so this is the CIP project number 63, capital improvement of the capital improvement plan. It is a improvement of the rec center locker rooms. The last improvement of the locker rooms other than the carpet was done in 1993. And so this is to replace all the wall and flooring tile, to remove the carpet and put in floor tile, replace all the plumbing fixtures, lighting, hand and hair dryers, replace the ceiling tile, heat pumps above the ceiling there were a couple that had been replaced, but replace the rest of them, remove part of the center sections of the lockers, swinging out the others so that we can have more floor space, remove the permanent benches and replace with chairs and stools so that it is more accessible and user-friendly. The shower area will become 3 shower stalls so that they're more accessible. And then we will also be replacing the handicap shower so that it has more accessible features. The plans have been available since April 9th. A mandatory pre-bid was held on April 14th, and bids are due at 2 o'clock on the 28th. The estimate of the project is, a cost estimate of the architect gave $175,000 plus there will be, and then the allocation in the CIP was $500,000.
Okay, thank you. I'll now turn it over for public comments. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? Again, you can press the icon, raise hand at the very bottom of your attendee window, or you can dial *9 if you're on your phone. And seeing none, I will close that public hearing and bring us to item 5, which is a resolution approving and adopting these plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the Recreation Center locker rooms project. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
It's been motioned and seconded, and this requires a roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
Sires. We may have lost him again. Tiber,
And just a point of order, I did have a question too.
Oh, forgive me. Yes.
So I'll lower my hand now. I just wanted to review, Mayor Green, the overall schedule. I know pre-bid is maybe a newer concept. At least I'm not real familiar with it. But are we accelerating this to start construction in during this shutdown period, or will the timeline be something different?
We've talked with the contractors. So the pre-bid is so that we make sure that all contractors have seen the scope of work. We did talk during that pre-bid that we would be willing to accelerate the construction timeline if we can maintain a minimum amount of time that the lockers are closed down. So we don't want to allow construction to start earlier and then the locker rooms are closed for 10 weeks. If they can still maintain a 5-week construction schedule and get their materials, then we'd be happy to start construction earlier.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
another question for Jamie then. These changes, they're in both locker rooms, right?
Correct.
And are these reflective of the feedback that we received in the focus groups around? I know it's not building a whole new facility, but will this satisfy some of the concerns from that study?
It won't necessarily satisfy everything that people wanted, but I know that there were a lot of concerns regarding some of the fixtures, and a lot of people disliked the carpet in the locker room. So that's one of the big things that we are removing and replacing with tile and a more cleanable surface. There were some concerns about the accessibility in the lockers, and so we are focusing on those things.
Great, thanks.
Okay. And any other questions from council? So if council will indulge my mistake, I would like to recast that vote just with this new information that you received. So Madam Clerk, if you can give a roll, please, again.
Sure. Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
Sires, still gone. Tiber,
Aye.
all members present voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us to item 6 on the agenda, which is a public hearing on a proposed ordinance amending the boundaries for the wards and precincts within the city of Cedar Falls to incorporate recently annexed territory. Is there a motion to file and approve?
Motion to receive and file.
You can file. Okay, so there's a motion and a seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Are there any written communications filed with City Clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll turn it over to Shane Graham for staff comments at this point.
Mr. Mayor, Shane is under the attendees, so you may have to allow him to speak.
Okay. Shane.
He's a panelist now.
Oh, okay, thank you. So Mr. Graham.
Yep. He needs to turn on his audio.
Don't have sound yet. You are unmuted, but just no sound yet. And still no sound.
Mr. Mayor, maybe I'll just jump in here and just give a brief overview. This is really the last step in the annexation of the property, the 244 acres that we looked at out west. And this is really verifying which ward and precinct boundary for the adjustment of the annexation area.
Okay, thank you. And apologies, Shane, you'll still get paid tonight. So that's the staff comments. We'll move it over to public comments now. And again, as before, if you have a question or comment, you can raise your hand using the raise hand icon in the attendees bar, or press *9 to let me know that you'd like to speak. And I am seeing none again. So I will close that public hearing. And that brings us to item 7, which is passing the ordinance amending the boundaries for wards and precincts within Cedar Falls to incorporate this annexed territory upon its first consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Been motioned and seconded. Are there any council questions or comments for this item? Seeing none, this will require a roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
Sires, Tiber.
Aye.
All members currently present voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That closes out our special agenda items, and I'll move us over into new business now. First is our consent calendar. There's 11 items on this. Does anyone in council wish to pull items 8 through 11? I'll pull item 10.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, pull to item 10.
Okay. And any other items from council and from the public? So I see one hand. Okay, so that's Mr. Schaefer. Go ahead, Mr. Schaefer. You've got your mic muted. I'm unmuting it now.
Councilman Sires?
Just a moment. We're still in the public comment part, or the public speaking.
I need something to block this area.
For Mr. Schaefer, I do see you have an item you'd like to have brought forward, but I'm not able to. Oh, there you are.
I think I hit it by mistake. My apologies.
Yes, Mr. Schaefer. Name and address for the record. Or actually, no, just the item you'd like to pull at this time.
No, I don't. I hit it by mistake. I don't.
All right. Well, thanks for helping us practice with it. So I will mute you back. And anyone else have a item? Okay, so this is 231-5209. If you'd like to give name and address, or give the item you'd like to have pulled.
Yes, sir. This is Rick Sharp, 1623 Birch Street. You already pulled item 10, so I'll
Yes, sir.
comment on that when I get it.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep an eye out for you. All right, so those are just item 10 would like to be pulled. So I'll go ahead and read the others for voice approval. The first is item 8, approve recommendations of the mayor relative to appointment of boards and members to boards and commissions. 9 is receive and file communication from the Civil Service Commission for a certified list for the position of administrative assistant. And then item 11 is approving the applications for beer permits and liquor licenses. Is there a motion to approve these items minus 10?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So those items pass, and that brings us back to item 10, which is receive and file a communication from the Civil Service Commission relative to a certified list for the position of Public Safety Director and Police Chief. Is there a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Motion to approve.
Okay, it's been
Second.
the motion and seconded. I'll open it up for council questions and comments.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Harding, go ahead.
So this motion is just to get file a certified list, correct? And we could still certify further lists in the future. Could you give some comment, or staff give some comment on what portion of this process we're in?
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Gaines, I'll turn that over to you.
So with every civil service position that we have, there's a process that actually goes, and I'll touch on a little bit of that. So we start off by advertising that particular position, and usually it's given 3 to 4 weeks. We receive those applications, and application, resume, cover letter, all of those items would come in. What happens then is the HR department keeps those, sends out an anonymous questionnaire to the applicants. The applicants then score those questionnaires, and they come back, and that's all done anonymously. We don't know who the names are. So in this particular case, we had 5 applicants that submitted some preliminary information. 2 of the applicants dropped out because they didn't meet all of the, for one reason or another, they dropped out because they didn't submit all of the required information, or maybe they didn't fill out their survey or something like that. So we ended up with 2 internal candidates, 1 external candidate that went through the process of the questionnaire, and then also sitting through an interview once the questionnaire was completed. So that's kind of where we are. Everything was scored. They went to the Civil Service Commission. The Civil Service Commission then certified the list of 3 candidates. And so really, when you have a certified list, there's got to be a reason why you don't hire off of that particular list. I think that's kind of a broad overview, but maybe Director Rodenbeck or Director Olson can jump in as well.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, yes, go ahead. Is that Councilor Harding?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Gaines. That clarifies a lot of this. Are we allowed to be privy to the reasons the other 2 candidates, what they didn't complete? I'm just curious to know, was it something that was due to COVID, or something that maybe they couldn't get finished in time? Do we know why they were disqualified or dropped out?
Mayor, I can answer that question.
Yes, thank you, Director Rodenbeck. Go ahead.
As Mr. Gaines noted, there's several things they needed to submit, a cover letter, a resume, and an application. And those 2 candidates did not submit an application. And for us, what's important about an application form is that's where it talks a lot about job history. It also is our sign off to do background check and that type of thing. And so we always find the application very important, and neither one of them submitted that piece of information.
And just for clarification's sake, I'm looking at the timeline sheet that Director Olson or Mr. Gaines provided. Those applications originally were due by February 26th. And then is that the part that the 2 applicants who dropped out, is that what they did not submit, was the regular application?
Correct.
Okay. The questionnaire responses were due March 20th, which was well within the COVID window, where I think that there might have been some disruption, but the applications were due prior, at least in Iowa, to when we really started going under some prohibitions and issues. I don't recall if that was the case on the East and West Coast when they started being impacted, to if those candidates might have been impacted by the fact that they were in the middle of a pandemic crisis. So that's a question that's not easy to answer. Are there other questions from council before we go to questions from public?
I have a question, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Cyrus, go ahead.
My question is, the police chief, is he just the police chief, or did he have to be a fireman as well? Is that why there's so few people that are applying, because there's so few that would both be a policeman and also be a fireman? Shouldn't we have a tremendous amount of people apply for this police position?
Director Olson, do you want to jump in with that?
Yeah, certainly. So we had, well, first maybe I should talk a little bit about where we put our ads out for that position. And so we did put an ad in the Waterloo Courier, and they put it out there on some online boards. We also put it in LinkedIn, Facebook, our website. There may have been some other social media accounts. I'm not exactly sure all of them. And then it went to the Grow Cedar Valley job site as well. And two of the applicants, actually 3 of the 5 applicants are from out of state. So it did reach out. As a matter of fact, we had one on one coast and one on the other coast apply. So it reached out quite a ways. There are a lot of these social media sites actually email some of these ads. I get emails weekly for police chief jobs and the such that come unsolicited. So the ads went out there. So I don't think there's any real issue there. The fact, and actually if you back up to 2008, when I applied for the police chief position, there were actually 7 applicants. 7 at that time. And I think a certified list of 4 is what we ended up, what the city ended up certifying. So I don't know that you really necessarily get as many applications as you think you might, for like a job, a police officer type job or a firefighter type job, we do get considerably more.
Mayor Green?
Yes, Councilor Tiber, go ahead.
Yeah, it may be helpful to understand, what we are truly seeking here in terms of qualifications and skills. So maybe Director Olson can explain a little bit more, and that might answer Councilman Sires' question too, in terms of qualifications and why this would be different than a traditional police officer or firefighter.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tiber. Yes, Director Olson?
Yeah, so this position, I mean, we're obviously looking for a police chief. There's no question about that. But what's a little bit different with Cedar Falls and maybe some other cities is you do have a director that oversees the police chief. And of course, then you have your city administrator and your mayor and council. So we do have another layer there. But we also want somebody, we desire to have somebody that has some, maybe some fire experience or fire skills. We do ask that they either obtain or have a firefighter certification. So I hope that answers that question.
It does. Thank you, Director.
Yes, Mr. Sires?
Yeah, my question was, so you want these guys to be firefighters also, where I think that maybe the council should be more involved with choosing our next police chief, because the police chiefs and the higher ups really should be looked at by representatives other than other employees. That's just my own opinion, and that's how we get good representation in our city government. Is that not so? Didn't it used to be there was 3 committees, and then one of them was administration committee, and they went and looked into hirings of these higher up positions? I believe that's how it went.
If I'm paying Mr. Mayor.
Before my time, so I wouldn't know that. Yes, Director Olson?
So so first of all, we are governed by the civil service process. So we have no choice but to follow that process. And what we did, actually, we had a civil service meeting back on February 5th, and we laid out the entire plan for a questionnaire, the interviews, and the actual questions, the actual questionnaire, the documents that we're going to use for scoring, who's going to be on the committee to review the questionnaire, who's going to be in the committee to do the interviews, all the way up to the approval process. So they certified, certification isn't the right word, but they approved that process. So we're following that process exactly as we laid out to the Civil Service Commission, and they approved. And then the following steps, I happen to print out a copy here of our city ordinance. It indicates the police chief shall be recommended for appointment by the Director of Public Safety Services to the city administrator, and by the city administrator to the mayor for city council approval. So we're following that part of the ordinance as part of this process.
Okay, Councilor Harding, you had your hand up?
Yes. So I think the process is going well. My question would be, and I love this timeline that they sent out. It has so much great information on it. My question would be that these dates upcoming, the April 22nd is the interview, and then April 27th, public meet and greet. And all this is subject to change. I realize that. And then the April 28th final interview, and then hopeful appointment by May 4th. Has there been any internal discussions about kind of moving this back until this COVID stuff is over? Because, the Zoom interviews for the guy out of state is going to be really tough. I'm assuming he probably can't fly out here and meet with all of us and see the area, as well as I just feel that it's a little tough to choose this. And I believe the acting police chief has at least 6 months until he has to be approved again. I guess ultimately just wondering if there's been discussion on kind of delaying this and pushing it back until we can kind of be in person again and get a better foothold.
But we have actually, we have had some discussions in regards to that, because we want to do a public meet and greet, as you saw on that document. By the way, this is the document that Civil Service saw as well. So we have talked about that meet and greet, and we know that we can't do a public meet and greet where we invite the public in and meet and shake the hands and do that kind of thing. So what we've been talking about is a virtual web type meet and greet that somehow the citizens could ask questions of the candidates online. So we've talked about that. We've talked about delaying it. So we're really trying to figure out the best way to do that public meet and greet, the best way that we can. Now, the individual from out of state that's certified on the civil service list, I've talked to him. He said he would travel here. He's not afraid to do that. We just need to figure out if that's how we want to do that, if that's the right thing to do right now. So I'll be quite honest with you, we're not exactly sure. We're going to wait for this process tonight, and then get with that individual again and just see exactly how we could make the next step happen and what would be the right time frame.
Mr. Mayor.
So I would follow that question up with whose decision would it be to change the timeline then? Is that something you'd be requesting from council? If the council desires to push back the interviews to potentially June and retain Acting Chief Birdie as the acting chief, is that something council can provide direction on? I guess I'd ask that to Mr. Gaines just as a process question.
I think procedurally, it's really kind of up to the department director when he would like to try to move forward with bringing a candidate for myself and the mayor to consider.
But would that be as a process question? Wouldn't that also fall under the council though? If they desire to change it, could they, because of the circumstances we're under? Could this be one of those exceptional circumstances where we do rechange that schedule so that it's a little later on? I don't want to push it one way or another, but I do want to make sure that council understands what their authority is here in this, if there is authority.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't see any reason why we couldn't delay it or put it off, but perhaps we design some type of meet and greet and see if that's acceptable, or maybe we wait. Maybe if we could put something together and propose it. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here.
All right. So that does lead us into more of an area outside of what this agenda item is for. So I should be careful not to let it draw out too far. Considering this list itself and what's coming forward, it sounds like council has a better understanding of what this actually represents. That this is a receive and file item, so it's not something the council approves. It's just we accept it into the record. So are there other questions about that process?
I've got one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just direct a question to Director Olson and ask, are we satisfied with the candidate pool that we have today? I mean, you're the one that ultimately needs to decide and move forward along with our administrator, qualified and capable people. So are you satisfied with the 3 on the list that we have right now, or do we need to broaden the net?
Yeah, no, we're very satisfied with these. These three people are very qualified for the position. I will say if they weren't qualified, if we had any doubts, we would ask the civil service not to put them and certify a list with these individuals or a particular individual on it.
Okay, thank you.
I have one short follow-up question, please.
Yes, Councilmember Cyrus, go ahead.
So how many elected officials were involved with these candidate choices? That's my final question. How many representatives from the city were involved in choosing these three candidates?
Well, the interviews and the scoring of the questionnaire, and of course the interviews are scored as well, consists of all city staff that are involved in that process.
So there were no elected officials who represent citizens that were involved in this whatsoever with a police chief choice, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to follow up on that. Thank you.
Yep. And I'll also note too that my first interaction with these candidates, according to the list, is on April 28th with that one final candidate. So,
Mayor, if I could just jump in too, the civil service process doesn't allow for really elected officials to get in there at this particular stage, because it's supposed to be anonymous with the scoring that actually occurs. So it's not that anybody was excluded. It's just the way the state law in the civil service process works.
Mr. Mayor?
yes, Mr. Dyer, go ahead.
Could I ask Councilman Harding a question? Were you curious about extending the time to look for additional candidates, or just to allow us to be more participant in the process?
Not necessarily to look for more candidates. I was hoping to have 4 or 5 on the list, a couple more on the list, for sure. I knew that we weren't going to have 10 or 15 on the list. But ultimately, I was just thinking and wondering if this whole craziness of the COVID has really affected us getting all the applicants we can, and also even if it's the smartest move to make as a city to push this through the pipeline now at this point in time when we wouldn't be hurt by delaying it because we have an excellent acting police chief right now. That was kind of my line of thinking.
Well, just listening to Director Olson's comments, it sounds like, and Ron's comments, that we're following the process, that Jeff and his team is pretty comfortable with our candidates. So if we're not looking for additional candidates, I wouldn't have a problem with waiting just so that we could all participate more, but not if we're looking for more candidates. It doesn't sound like it's necessary.
I don't necessarily think that we need to. If we're waiting, we could have more candidates or we couldn't. I don't know that, I trust in the process, and I think staff's done a great job. I just feel that we have that in these set of circumstances, it poses much more difficulty to truly interview someone, truly get the scope of what they can do. And it may pose an unfair advantage to the person from out of town in some ways. So I would like to see, especially this is a huge decision for the city, to make sure that there's nothing looked back upon as, oh, we did this when we could have done that. Again, is there a rush? Do we need to make it happen right now? Or is it okay to wait and do this in June or July when things have calmed down a little bit and we can, make sure everything's equal footing? That's all.
Thank you.
One question also, with the May 4th date that's currently listed for the candidate appointment, is that meant to be the council meeting where that final candidate, the top candidate, would then be interviewed by council that night in person?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that was the intent, to hit the May 4th council meeting with the candidate. Say, if you don't mind, I'd like to back up a little bit to one of Mr. Harding's comments.
Okay.
So, we talked about the best ways to interview because we always have candidates that live a distance away. How many candidates do you bring to town? And of course, under these circumstances, we can't bring people to town. So what we did is even the 2 inside candidates, we even interviewed by Zoom. So we didn't do any face-to-face interviews because we wanted to make it as level playing field as possible. So even though they're right here in town and working for the city, we did do a Zoom interview with them. And as City Administrator Gaines made note of, when we did the surveys, they're sent out by HR, then they're returned and distributed us with a number on it, not a name. So it does provide some anonymity to that process.
Cool, that's good. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from council before we open it up for public questions and comment?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Cruz, go ahead.
are we allowed to ask how far away or what city this candidate is that they could drive in as opposed to fly, or is that public knowledge? Can we discuss that?
Yeah, I believe that becomes public knowledge once the civil service list is certified. So he's from the state of Washington.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Miller, go ahead.
And for staff, in terms, how does the process go here just for the public? And I guess if somebody's got some background on, I think to Councilman's point earlier regarding council people being involved with these processes, is there a historical reference or something along those lines that has changed in the past or something that we could offer up?
Mayor, I might be able to jump in on that question. So I would say for several years now, and when I say several, I'm going to say probably 15 to 20 years, I would say that we've followed a similar process to a lot of our upper level positions. And that is staff's in it from the beginning, maybe to the end. If it's a director position, then maybe a couple council members have been involved or the mayor at that point. So I would say what we're doing right now is not anything different than really what we've done in what I call somewhat recent years. I guess it's what people determine as recent. How things might have transpired 25 years ago when there was committees, there might have been more involvement at that point, but I would say that's probably going back quite a few years. One of the other things I wanted to point out is that Mr. Olson mentioned about trying to be consistent with all the candidates. We have been trying to do that through this process to make everything fair. It's an unusual times with the COVID, and we can't do things how we maybe normally would about having candidates come in. But again, we're trying to figure out what's our best way to make sure it's a fair process and equitable to all the candidates. The other thing too, as we talk about pushing things back, is one of the factors we will have to look into is civil service and an acting status is a 90-day status. I think it was mentioned maybe earlier at 6 months, but so that is one thing we would have to work around and look into too if we decided to push something back.
Just as a clarification, I don't know if it's that big a deal, but for the 90 days, my understanding from city code is that it is listed for the acting police chief at 180 days before requiring a new term.
Mr. Mayor, point of order, please.
Yes, Mr. Cyrus, go ahead.
I've been working with an older councilman, and he turned me on to ordinance number 1806, where all standing committees at the first regular meeting in January, five council people are nominated to each one of these committees. There was 3 committees. There was administration, there was public works, and there was community relations and planning. And that first one was administration, and this is still a current ordinance, 1806. And I believe it was in 1982. I've cut that off when I copied this. But the first one came in 1959. And then it was amended to this one where we only had 3 committees, and probably somebody that's been on longer like Frank or Susan would be able to address this. But this is where in the administration committee that's appointed by the mayor at the first working meeting in January, that's where we would have the council people look into these higher up hirings. And I just wanted to point that out. It's 1806. I know we're not all together. I would have had a copy of this for everybody, and I just happened to have it. I got it the other day, but if you looked into that, Mr. Mayor, I think you could see what I was talking about. It's ordinance 1806.
Well, yeah, and back in on January, I think it was first meeting in January, I did appoint, I'm looking for it here, appointed the standing committees for 2020. And that administration committee was every council member with Susan DeBurr as the chair. So within the final interview with the top candidate, where it says April 28th, final interview with top candidate by mayor, mayor pro tem, the city administrator, and the admin committee chair. If that's not set in stone later, I'd be willing to entertain having that be not just the admin committee chair, but to have the admin committee in the interview. And that's because I personally feel that all council should be involved in those kinds of decisions, not just a few picked ones. We can discuss that later, but it sounds like what's in this document isn't set in stone, or it's not. There's some civil service requirements, but I think for those last couple parts, we do have some ability to change those. So we probably not a discussion for right now to decide what that would be, but certainly willing to entertain that, Mr. Sires.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So any other questions for this item before going to public comment? Okay.
One more thing. Sorry.
Yeah.
I appreciate everybody indulging me, asking a bunch of questions on this. I appreciate staff, all they've done following the civil service list, and I know they're working really hard under these crazy times. I guess I have no qualms with the list at all, by the way. I'm ready to file and receive it. My question would be, is it possible to receive some more updates as you guys go through the process on what you decide to do, and how we, how we're going to continue going forward, just to get some more updates? That would be appreciated. That's all.
Right. Thank you. So at this point, I'll open it up to public comment. And I know, Mr. Sharp, you had some questions. I think I'm unmuting you now. Mr. Sharp, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Sharp. Name and address for the record, please.
Yes, sir. Rick Sharp, 1623 Birch Street, Cedar Falls. I'm requesting that you pull the civil service list for police chief from this council agenda. The reason being that, to me, having only 3 candidates, with 2 of them internal, says the city did not do a good job advertising the position. I would ask that you hire a private firm to list it nationwide. The reason why is because unless the job position was written in a way that the city's 2 internal candidates can meet the criteria, Cedar Falls should have had a lot of interest in it. There should have been a number of young, motivated police supervisors from across the state and country looking to improve their resume by adding police chief to their duties. Likewise, there should have been a number of middle-aged police supervisors that can't go any higher in their department that should have applied. And finally, there should have been a number of older chiefs or assistant chiefs in larger communities that were looking to slow down a bit as they approach retirement. The pay should have attracted many candidates, as Cedar Falls is known to pay their managers a higher wage than larger cities in Iowa. Plus, Cedar Falls as a community itself should be attracted to many candidates. If the job requirements were written to exclude a number of candidates, like the firefighter certifications, those should be deleted. What will a police chief have the need for a firefighter skill set? His primary job is administrative and running the police department, not both police and fire. Besides, that's what the public safety director should have. I'm wondering how many good candidates did not apply if this was the case. If they need it down the road, they can acquire it after they get hired. After all, newly hired PSOs have 3 years to get their firefighter 1 certifications. Waterloo interviewed 4 police chief candidates, 2 internal and 2 external, and they selected an external candidate. Who knows how many more applied for Waterloo? Plus, none of those candidates applied for Cedar Falls. Don't you think that is odd? A lack of candidates says more about possible concerns with the city management or leadership structure than about the city itself. That should be addressed first. Why aren't we getting a number of people to apply here? There were 10 candidates to choose from for the fire chief's position that Chief Bostic was selected from. Given that there were more police departments and fire departments, I would think that police chief numbers would be at least 10 too, if not more. I ask that you consider this. It's not against the individuals, but more so, why can't Cedar Falls get more applicants for a prestigious position? And that should be a question answered first. I also had a couple of follow-up questions too, that who does have the authority in selecting the police chief. I understand, like Director Olson said, he makes a pick, he gives it to Director Gaines, who gives it to the mayor, who's supposed to give the council. What happens if the mayor doesn't like the recommendation from both directors? Do you as a mayor still have to bring it forward to the council? Likewise, do all the candidates have to be offered the job if they're on the civil service list? Meaning, if the mayor offers one candidate up to the council, but the council wants somebody else, can they vote down the mayor's choice? And then does the mayor have to bring up the second and third place candidates in his mind? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. For that first part about the candidate pool, I'll allow city staff if you'd like to comment on that.
Certainly, if I could, Mr. Mayor. So the advertisements that we did, I explained earlier, and that would reach online nationwide. 3 of our candidates were from 3 other states: New York City, Michigan, and Washington. So we certainly reached out quite a distance. We're certifying a list of 3, and as Mr. Sharp indicated, Waterloo certified a list of 4. So I don't think we're too far off from what they did. I will tell you, there's a lot of factors, and it changes annually what you see for applications for police chiefs. And what you see in a lot of departments is you see a lot of people work their way up to I'm going to say an assistant chief or a number 2 position, and they stop and they don't go any further. And the reason for that is because when something goes bad at a police department, because it's a very difficult job, it gets a lot of media attention, and the chiefs feel vulnerable, and there's a lot of political pressure, and there's a lot of situations that a lot of people don't want to get involved with. So you do see a lot of people stop when they get to a certain level, and they don't aspire to become a police chief. So there's a lot of that occurs within the police industry. And I guess the other questions would maybe be for our city attorney. I don't know that I should be the one answering those.
Okay, would there be a request for Mr. Rogers to speak on that, or was that just rhetorical?
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me okay?
You're fine, thank you.
The certified list needs to be exhausted before a new list is created, which means that there needs to be a candidate approved from the list. And if no candidate is selected, then the process starts over, but there has to be significant reasons for rejecting everyone off the list. Now, as far as that last step, the mayor does have discretion, of course, as to whether or not, just as the city administrator does, whether or not to take the recommendation of the public safety director forward. But if they choose not to, then you go to the next person on the list, and so forth.
Okay, and so it sounds like that was the same case with if council decided not to approve the first candidate put forward by the mayor, then the second candidate from that certified list would come forward, correct?
Right.
Okay. All right.
Mayor Green?
Yes.
I think could this be out of order? I believe that Mr. Sharp is currently on administrative leave and a paid employee right now. And it seems to me like that might be a violation of collective bargaining.
Oh, good point. I didn't catch that. Technically, yes. So if he's a city employee, then he wouldn't be able to speak on any city topics. So I apologize for allowing that to go forward. Thank you.
Collective bargaining.
Okay, so next I have Mr. Salentic. If you can give name and address for the record, please.
Jeremy Salentic, 1008 Rockland Street. My question about the meet and greet was, is this just a meet and greet for the city council, or is this a meet and greet for the general public? And if so, I really have no problem postponing this until a point in time where we can physically meet this candidate in person. You can only tell so much from a Zoom meeting. Sometimes you can read a lot more about a person when you read their body language and get to meet them and shake their hand and everything. So that's my question, and my comment about it is I think a meet and greet would be great for the general public that can be in person.
All right. Thank you very much. So Director Olson, if you'd want to just comment on that for the public or the meet and greet.
Yeah, that was going to be a meet and greet for any of the public.
Okay, and that could include council too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there wouldn't be, aside from the council formal approval at the council meeting, there wouldn't be a separate time currently on this list set aside for council to discuss. Okay, so I see a hand from Mr. Frine. So Mr. Frine, if you can give name and address for the record, please.
Is it working?
Yep, I hear you just fine.
Oh, perfect. TJ Frine, 1319 Austin Way. Sorry, it's the first time hooking up to this thing. Just a couple questions, just on the civil service list, quickly. Is the civil service list going to come out as a ranking of candidates 1 to 3, or is it going to come out alphabetical? I've been had experience with both, so I kind of want to just hear how that's going to come out. How long is the list good for? Is it good for 1 year or 2 years? It's generally the experience I have with them. And then regarding the questionnaire that didn't get sent back, what kind of, if any, follow-up did we do to remind those people that the questionnaire was due or confirm that they've received it? I suspect we did, but I didn't hear that. Just kind of going off Mr. Solenik, in-person meet and greet is far better than this here, just because you kind of get comfortable putting that barrier between yourself and everybody else when you're on a Zoom or video, or you're not even in the same room as the other person. There's that barrier there that's kind of gives comfort to people.
Mayor, I think again I can address a couple of those
Yes, Director.
questions. In the packet was the list, and you can see it's in rank order by the score, and this was based on the average between what we would call the pre-interview or interview and the questionnaire. So you can see that's how it was ranked in the list that was in the packet. Also in back regards to the 2 candidates and what was not submitted for any position, what we do is when people submit materials, we automatically send an email back to them reminding them, hey, make sure you have all materials submitted that were required. And so when the question was, do we, had any feedback back to them, that is our standard practice with any position, is to send them something back doing that.
Okay, thank you. Looking at other hands.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
I wasn't done.
Oh, well, unfortunately, that's the end of the comment part.
But, okay.
Now, this is an odd situation since I probably would have seen verbal or visual cues. Maybe you're walking away from the podium. So I will allow additional.
Mr. Mayor, I was in mid-sentence.
Okay. Well, that's obvious then. Go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I mean, I like the back and forth better. So if we can keep doing that, that'd be great. No. With regards to I mean, like, it's very difficult, and I know that I've had some experience with hiring. Like, following up on emails is very difficult with email filters and that sort of thing. And I know it says, check your spam or whatnot, but it's still very, very difficult to get information to people via email. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but just maybe something to keep in mind for the future. Okay. And then for the interview process, was there anybody outside on the interview panel, like community, like high-ranking community members, maybe like the NAACP or anybody from community organizations that was involved in that, or was it just city staff? And then I'm done.
Okay, thank you. So I'll open that up for city staff to comment.
The members that scored the candidate questionnaire in the interview process were all city staff.
Okay. Thank you. And I see there was a hand up from a Galaxy J3 Orbit. I will allow you to talk if you have still your hand up. Is there anything you'd like to say, Mr. Orbit?
I was wondering about the
name and address for the record, please.
I actually don't live in Cedar Falls, but
name and address for the record, please.
Okay. 221 Main Street, Reed, Linois.
And name, please?
Kristen Miller.
Kristen Miller, thank you.
And I was just inquiring about the Doby Joey's and that lot being torn down.
That'll be an item later in the meeting. So
Okay,
be happy to answer that question once we get to that point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else for this item from the public? I'm seeing no additional hands, so I'll bring it back to council. And Mr. Harding, you've got your hand up for a while. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a question for Attorney Rogers. So if we receive and file this list, and we decided to wait a little bit and we happen to have more applicants, could we receive and file another list? Or once we receive and file this list, that's it? That would be my first question.
Mr. Mayor, the list is certified. It's actually certified by the Civil Service Commission, who has sole jurisdiction over certifying the list. The action tonight is more ministerial than anything else. So the certified list has been created. And so that's the list that we need to work from.
Okay. So that makes sense. All right. Yeah, I would still,
I don't think I answered the rest of your question. As far as the timing of the appointment, then that is not necessarily up to Civil Service Commission. Although I think we did provide Civil Service with a time frame, and so we'd want to go back and probably update the commission if we vary from that very much. That was their expectation. But honestly, I'm not sure the Civil Service Commission dictates the timing of the recommendation approval by council, particularly when you're talking about a situation we find ourselves in now.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. My next question will be for the mayor. Maybe is there, I do think it would be prudent to, that people want to be involved in this situation, and I understand that. Is there a way we could discuss or hear other thoughts of other council members about whether they would want to recommend to staff to wait, or if they're just going to go with updates, or how they would do it? I certainly would like to see us wait until all this national emergency is over to really lock in place a final, police chief. It's a big decision. So I want to make sure, not that we're not doing it correctly, we are, but I would want to make sure that we satisfy everyone in the public, has a chance to meet them, that they can't come back later and say we didn't do something or we didn't wait when we could have.
Well, to separate that from this item, could we hold that thought up until the council referral time, and then potentially entertain a referral to have this addressed in, say, a special work session to see if the council wishes to change the date? Because I don't know if we can decide that here tonight officially. It's not really an agenda item. Mr. Rogers, would you have any insight on that?
I agree. I don't think the council should act on any kind of direction towards this appointment under this agenda item.
Okay, so we'll discuss that. If a council member wants to bring that forward as a referral item to discuss, we can just see how to shape that as a council action or council desire. So anything else on this item that we'd want to talk about for the civil service list? Okay, seeing none, then this requires a voice vote. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so I have one nay from Mr. Sires. And that passes. So that brings us up to the resolution calendar. This starts on item 12 on our agenda list. Is there anyone from the council who wishes to pull an agenda item from 12 to 23? Mr. Barry, you're muted right now.
Number 18.
Okay, so number 18 from Councilmember Miller.
We pull 17.
And 17 from Councilmember Harding.
And then let me look at my list. I have it right here. What was the Doey Joey one? 20.
That's the site plan. That's 21.
21, yeah. Can we pull 21? And then I think that's it for those.
Okay.
I have a question on number 14.
14 from Councilmember DeBoer, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And anything else from council? Okay, then I'll open it for the public. Does anyone wish to pull an item? Yes, I see Mr. Frine. So Mr. Frine, which item would you like to pull?
Number 13, please.
13. TJ. Okay, and any others? So if you're on the phone, you can press *9 and I'll see your hand. Otherwise, you can press the raise hand icon on your screen. Okay, and seeing none, I will read the other items. That would be item 12, which is a resolution authorizing redemption of outstanding general obligation capital loan notes. Item 15 is a resolution approving the certificate of completion and accepting the work of Peterson Contractors for the University Avenue Reconstruction Project, Phase 2. Item 16 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a supplemental agreement relative to the Union Road Recreational Trail Project. Item 19 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an amendment with River Place Properties and State Street Mixed Use relative to the conveyance of real estate at State Street and second, it's the parking lot. Item 20 is resolution approving the College Hill Neighborhood Overlay Site Plan for temporary wheat paste murals in the College Hill Business District. Item 22 is a resolution setting May 4th, 2020 as the date of public hearing on amendments to the FY 2020 budget. And then finally, resolution, or 23 is a resolution setting May 4th, 2020 as a date for public hearing for proposed rezoning of property from A1 to R1 and other rezonings. So is there a motion to approve these items minus 13, 14, 17, 18, and 21?
So moved.
The motion and seconded, and this requires a roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Miller?
Aye.
DeBoer?
Aye.
Cruz?
Aye.
Harding?
Aye.
Dara?
Aye.
Sires?
Aye.
Tiber?
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So that will bring us back to item 13, which is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a second amendment to a loan agreement with Sturgis Falls Celebration Incorporated.
Motion to approve.
It's been approved and seconded, and I'll open up for council questions or comments. Then I'll open it up to Mr. Frine. So you had a question about this item. Go ahead, Mr. Frine.
I was just wondering, kind of just give the basic insight on what the amendment entails. And then if there is any precedence to amending, city loans to private organizations in the past. And then if there was any other, private organizations that maybe have been, maybe lack success for one reason or another that the city has kind of helped along the way. Just the idea of it kind of worries me a little bit, that the city is obviously wanting personally, outside of everybody else wanting Sturgis Falls to be successful, the city has a little skin in the game for Sturgis Falls being successful as well. And that kind of makes me a little bit nervous. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Frine. Director Rodenbeck, do you have a?
Sure. So everyone may recall back in 2014 that Sturgis Falls came to the city and for a loan of $100,000. And I would say at the time it was kind of a debate about whether that was appropriate or not for the city to loan that to Sturgis Falls. However, that was the decision at the time. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that, again, Sturgis Falls was, we had been incurring, flooding in OA, just constant kind of flooding. There was we moved, people may recall that Sturgis Falls used to be held in Island Park, and we moved them to Gateway to try to get, so maybe flooding would be less of an impact on them. And so as doing that, there was lots of things that had to be done at Gateway that Sturgis paid for. So there was a lot of reasons behind that loan. We did a first amendment in 2016 to the loan where they wanted to restructure. Originally, it was supposed to be a 4-year loan with $25,000 a year payment. What they asked for in 2016 was to restructure it and have the payments only be $15,000 a year. So that's what we did at that time. And then this year, again, because of everything going on with COVID-19, obviously Sturgis Falls, it's a difficult year for them. They are not sure, one, if they'll even be able to have the event. Obviously, it's been tough as it relates to sponsorships. And so they did come to just basically ask for the last two payments that were due in 20 and 21, could those be extended by 1 year and those payments due in 21 and 22? So that is the basis of this amendment, is really to take those payments and extend them by 1 year. As it relates to private companies, I would, or how this is consistent with other things, I would say this is unusual. We probably don't have other things that we would have a good comparable to, based on Mr. Frien's, question about history of doing amendments and changing loans. This is pretty unusual. So probably don't really have a good comparison there. I think maybe that was the majority of the questions, I think.
All right. Thank you. So any other questions from the public or comments on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council if there's any additional questions or comments.
I'd like, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Cyrus, go ahead.
I've got to say that Sturgis Falls celebration is absolutely one of the greatest things in the state of Iowa. It's free to everyone. I've worked with them the last couple of years, and the tremendous amount of work and what all the volunteers do is absolutely amazing. And they do it for free. It is amazing to me. I can't figure it out. Every time I go down there and see everybody working so hard to make a great thing happen for Cedar Falls, I just love it. I love that people love our community so much that they want to volunteer and do those things. For the 15 or 30,000, that's just compared to what they bring in and the donations they've made. They donated toward the band shell across from City Hall. They put in gateways, a little plaza over there. Tremendous donations they've made to Cedar Falls. I just can't say enough about them. Jay and his crew, it truly is amazing, the volunteers and everyone that works with that. So whatever we need to loan or do for them, I'm in favor of that. And I love all the work that they do. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? All right, seeing none, let me pull my sheet back out. This again was item 13, approving authorization of a second amendment to a loan agreement, and this requires a roll call vote.
Miller.
Aye.
DeVore.
Aye.
Cruz.
Here, or yes.
Harding.
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye.
Tiber.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Item 14 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a contract with laser line striping relative to 2020 pavement marking services. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Been motioned and seconded. I'll bring it to council for questions or comments. Ms. DeBurr?
Yeah, my question was, this is for line striping. It's about $46,000. And item line 4 and 5, or item 4 and 5 on it, were for bike lanes and roundabouts of about 22,000. My question is it looks like this is 11 roundabouts. Is that something that has to be done every year, or is this just unique that they're all being done?
All right, thank you, Councilor DeBurr. For Mr. Gaines, who would you like to answer that one?
I think I'd best be able to address that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Shea.
So it doesn't matter what street you're on. A lot of the pavement markings wear within a year. Obviously depends on the traffic on that street, and obviously the snow plows in the winter remove those pavement markings. There's specific things we can do during the road designs to try to help minimize that, but given the roundabout's nature, they do have to be painted every year.
All right, thanks, Dr. Shea. Any other questions from council?
A quick follow-up?
Yes, Councilor DeBeer, go ahead.
Yeah, but not all the bike lanes are being redone, is that correct?
Yeah, generally they're not done every year. We'll kind of rotate those, but this specific year, we're spending about $8,000 to repaint those Sharrow markings and bike lane markings.
Thank you. I'll now turn it over for the public.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Cruz, is that?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Is there any consideration on the process during the design of the streets and stoplight intersections and so on to put some sort of permanent stone or something in the street so that we don't have to repaint every year and it would be flushed for snow plowing purposes. That would substitute, like the bike sharrows could be embedded in the concrete or asphalt with a brick of some sort that always stays and doesn't have to be repainted, because this is a pricey expense every year. We may be painting more than normal, but I think there'd be other ways to increase the longevity of the markings. Curious.
Thank you, Director Shaggy.
I guess to touch on that a little bit, there's some design criteria that we have to make sure that we're following, and that's the manual of uniform traffic control devices. And there are some elements during design that we can look at to do some of those items Mr. Cruz was elaborating on, but a lot of them would not fall under the design requirements that we currently follow.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I'll open it to the public if there's any questions or comments. Again, *9 on your phone, or else the raise hand icon on your screen. And seeing none, I have one from Kelly Dunn. Go ahead. You just have to unmute your mic. There you are. Ms. Dunn, name and address for the record, please.
915 Royal Drive in Cedar Falls.
Okay.
I deal with the roundabouts a lot because I live close to University Avenue and I work on Prairie Parkway. Obviously, there's a learning curve to utilizing the roundabouts, and I feel like those arrows being very visible are very helpful to people who aren't used to using them, particularly when you come to the areas where, when I'm coming from the north going south on Prairie Parkway, and I get to that roundabout that's right by Unity Point, Prairie Parkway, and the Western Home, oftentimes people don't realize when you're in that inside lane, if you don't get off to keep going south, if you're in the inside lane, you need to merge. And so without those arrows, when you guys put those arrows in there right after the construction, that changed the safety factor of that roundabout tremendously. So while I understand it's expensive, I do feel like it's very, it helps to make it safer and easier for people to navigate. And then, I don't know, I love the sharrows. I know it's an expense, but it does make it easier to bike as a family when you're biking with little kids and trying to teach that, you have just as much right to that road as a car. I just feel like we're a bike community. Biking brings a lot of revenue typically to our community. And I just feel like it's an expense that's worth it. And that's it.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I will turn it back over to council for any final comments or questions. And seeing none, this requires a roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
Miller?
Yes.
DeVore? Is that yes?
Yes.
Sorry. Cruz?
Yes.
Harding?
Yes.
Dara?
Yes.
Sires?
Yes.
Tiber?
Yes.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That puts us to number 17, which is resolution approving and authorizing execution of supplemental agreement number 1 to the professional services agreement with AECOM Technical Services for acquisition services related to the Olive Street box culvert replacement project. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
By Mr. Dara, seconded, and I'll open it up for council questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Harding, go ahead.
This, I had written in to staff about this and got a great answer. There was an email from David Grant, and also he works with the College Hill neighborhood. Basically, I just wanted Ron to go over what they were doing to make sure that this location, looked good and worked environmentally with what we needed to do functionally. And Ron's had a great answer, but I don't need to read it for him verbatim. I just wanted him to kind of update everyone watching what they were looking for.
Thank you, Mr. King.
So I can just jump in real quick, and then I'll have Chase Shroggy maybe add a little bit as well. But one of the things that we looked at in replacing this is how does it fit in to the actual stream bed? How does it fit in with all of the other aesthetics? And one of the things is with regard to the Pedersen Plaza in that area. So I will let Chase actually kind of describe what he's working with the consultants on.
All right, thank you. Director Shroggy, go ahead.
Well, the current state that we're in with working with the consultant is we're not that far into design to start working on those design elements aesthetically, so it ties in with the area of College Hill. You know, we are working in a restricted corridor. It's very dense. You know, we have new buildings and apartments very adjacent to the structure that we're trying to replace. So we take all that into account and try to make sure that we can still achieve everything we do need to as it relates to localized flooding and things like that, but still have a aesthetically pleasing project.
Okay, so will there be an opportunity for the public to comment on those designs later on, or does it basically come forward just through staff and to council?
Generally, it'll come forward through staff, and we'll see it when the plans come forward.
Okay. So questions and comments again from council?
I would just add, I got that same email that Simon was talking about, and my recall is that waterway is pretty critical. We've done some long range planning. Last time we talked about the permeable alleyways and those being a part of a larger long range plan of how we take care of the water quality in our community. And aren't there some water quality issues with that waterway as well that really is kind of part of a long range plan that the city has? Chase or Ron?
That is correct. That specific watershed or sub-watershed is the only impaired watershed in Cedar Falls. So we have to be careful on some of the things we do, and we want to be sure to promote water quality elements in every one of the projects we take place in this watershed.
Thanks. Perhaps for a future referral when we can all look at each other face to face again, but I wouldn't mind having more of a discussion about this for our new council members as well as for those of us who've been here for a while, just as a reminder of what does it mean to be an impaired waterway, and what can we do to improve it? And I think this project is an example of that. But to me, it's a nice opportunity for us as a community to revisit our role in water quality. So just some upcoming referral, Mayor, probably, but wanted to point out it's part of a bigger long-range study that we've been doing.
Right, and it sounded like some of the questions or clarification needed was what the city and what residents were expecting that waterway to be. Is it a natural, aesthetic, beautified area? Certainly, I think the goal is not to have it as just a glorified drainage ditch, but what does that mean, and what investment do we need to put into it to make it the kind of waterway that we want to see? So, Mr. Dare, that sounds like a great idea for a work session moving forward.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
thanks, Chase. Thanks, Chase.
Mr. Mayor.
Any questions? Yes. Councilor Harding, go ahead.
Do we have, this question will be for Chase, are we at the point where we have any designs or thoughts about what the design is going to look like and how we're going to treat it?
We kind of have a general idea. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the corridor, but we're very constrained with some of the adjacent properties, and environmentally, we have to look at both water quality and the impacts around the corridor that it does. You know, if we do have property that's wide enough to convey the water that's coming through that watershed, obviously that would be our first choice. We would want to lay the slopes back, have more of a traditional waterway. But when you get into dense urban areas in any larger city, that corridor gets very restricted, and we have to find different design elements to still be able to convey that same quantity of water, but in a smaller channel.
Mm-hmm. Have we reached out possibly to the College Hill Partnership with their thoughts on it? I'm not sure where we're at with that.
At some point, I believe when we get far enough, we'll probably be doing that. At this time, we don't have enough information on the design to be able to convey that information to them, but we are looking at the different elements there, and I know Mr. Gaines elaborated on it a little bit, but we do have Pedersen Plaza there, and we're trying to incorporate that in some of our design on Olive, whether that includes some type of work there or expansion. We're still trying to review those alternatives.
Thanks, Chase. I appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's important to realize that where we are right now is we're at the very beginning of the project. This is the approval of the contract to help to start that design. So reaching out to the Collegeville partnership, having public input sessions, those are all part of what we do through the process of any of these designs. So we're just at the very, very beginning.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from council on this? Seeing none, this requires a roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Yes.
Dara,
Aye.
Sires,
Aye.
Tiber.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. That moves us to item 18, which is resolution approving and authorizing execution of a professional services agreement with Snyder and Associates relative to the Island Park Improvements Project. Is there a motion to approve?
So approve.
A motion and seconded. Questions from council?
Mayor, if I may, I was just hoping for some background from staff on the scope of this.
Yes, Councilmember Miller, thank you very much. For Mr. Gaines, who would you like to take that one?
I think Mr. Schrage is
okay.
handling the contract.
Thank you, Mayor. This project we've been looking at for the last few years. It's been programmed in the CIP. Island Park over the last few years and during our flood events, we get a significant amount of sand in that area, and it takes many staff hours and cost to remove that sand and relocate it. So this contract on the agenda tonight is to look at alternative ways that we could potentially restore that area to more of a natural environment, to avoid having to remove some of those flood events and that sand and the material from coming in there. So we're trying to bring some aesthetic elements in the park, make it more functional, but also keep in mind that this is an area that floods very frequently.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from council? Okay, any from the public? Star 9 or click the raise hand icon. Okay, seeing none, it goes back to Mr. Tiber. Go ahead, sir.
Sorry about that. I was just going to inquire, to Mr. Schrage, the state of Iowa now recognizes the Cedar River as a major waterway, and there were some planning elements in it that could also be incorporated along the river to improve portage and river access as well. I love that we're looking at this park in different ways. Obviously, Mother Nature's had its way with the park, and there are certain things that we need to preserve, in terms of, access to the boathouse. But also I just want to make certain that we are also incorporating the Iowa River Plan project, and I might have the name wrong, but that's something that I wanted to bring to staff's attention if it hasn't already been addressed.
Okay. For Director Schrage?
We'll be sure to take a look at that, Mr. Tiber.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council then? Okay, seeing none, this will require a roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Yes.
Dara,
Yes.
Sires,
Aye.
Tiber.
Yes.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That moves us down to item 21, which is the resolution approving a highway corridor and greenbelt overlay zoning district site plan for construction of a financial institution at 126 Brandon Lynn Avenue, which is where the current Doughy Joey's is. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Open it for council questions. Councilman Harding, you brought this up?
Yeah. I had some citizens contact me, and there was an article, I believe it was in the Courier, that they saw, and it made it seem like the council was pushing Doughy Joey's out or something. I didn't think that to be the case. I just wanted staff to clarify that this was basically a sale, that the owner of the land is selling, and we're just approving what the bank wants to put on the site, correct?
I can answer that. Yes, that is correct. It's just a private land sale, and we're just reviewing it based on the application we received from the bank.
Just wanted to make that clear.
Okay. And this is, I understand, fairly common to do this kind of site plan approval before actually selling the property, because there'd be no point for Dupaco to buy it if they couldn't put their bank on it. Is that correct?
We are just, yes, reviewing it based on the criteria that we have in the zoning ordinance. The city staff reviews it and then takes it to the Planning and Zoning Commission and the city council to make sure that they're meeting all the city codes.
Okay, thank you. I know we had a question earlier from the public. If you press *9 or else the raise hand, you can get in, but this might have answered your question. So I'll give just a moment there. Okay, I'm actually going to unmute Galaxy Orbit. Galaxy Orbit, did you still have a question for us? This is the person who was speaking earlier.
Hi there. This is the husband of the woman that asked earlier. I work at Doughy Joey's.
Yes, sir.
So we were just wondering, because we had contacted the owner, and we were under the assumption from what he told us that he had known nothing about this. And you basically answered already with letting us know that it was a sale, it was something agreed to, and so our questions are pretty much answered.
Okay, thank you. And could we just get your name and address for the record, please, sir?
This is Joseph Abrahamson, and I live at 221.5 Main Street, Reedland.
Super. Thanks for joining us tonight. Okay, so back to council. Any final questions or comments before we move to approval? Oh, yes, yeah, Councilmember Tiber, I see your hand up.
Sorry, hand should have been lowered.
Okay, hand is lowered. All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, then this requires a roll call vote.
Miller?
Aye.
DeBoer?
Aye.
Cruz?
Aye.
Harding?
Aye.
Dara?
Aye.
Tyers?
Aye.
Hyber?
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, terrific, thank you. That moves us out of the resolution calendar and into ordinances, which we start with number 24, which is passing an ordinance amending Chapter 16, offenses and miscellaneous provisions of the Code of Ordinances relative to prohibiting loitering upon its first consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. I'll open it up for council questions.
Mr. Mayor, there was also mentioned in the email that was sent forth about possibly making an exclusionary statement about artists in some capacities, such as someone painting a picture outside on College Hill or someone playing music. I think that may be something to open up for discussion. Not that it's a common occurrence, but we want to be clear in the ordinances and make sure that if someone is painting a picture out there and has approval to do that, that someone can't call the cops on them for standing out there and loitering.
Okay, I'll turn that over to Director Olson. Do you want to give a comment on those concerns?
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that would not apply to a scenario like this. Really, if you look at the ordinance, they have to obstruct, hinder, or prevent other persons from passing or attempting to pass. And one individual either working or having legitimate purpose being there wouldn't be of concern. A little history behind this is over the years we've had some problems on College Hill, and we met with a lot of the merchants and we discussed some of the things that we can do as a city and as merchants to help improve some of the behavior on the hill. And this was one of the ideas that we talked about with the merchants. So the majority of the merchants, I believe, are in favor of this ordinance as well.
Okay, any other questions from council on this?
Yeah.
Yes, Councilor Tiber, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify or at least seek some clarity with the ordinance itself. So 1639A1, the way that I read it, it really appears that, on any given right of way, this would be sidewalk or what have you, that there needs to be kind of safe passage. And I think that's how I'm reading that. I mean, people can still congregate on sidewalks. There just needs to be a safe passage. So please correct me if I'm wrong there. But the second provision in that, in letter A, just refers to any, really public building. And I didn't know if the loitering law was somehow consistent or non-consistent. Of course, it's not city property. Does loitering still apply to non-city property?
The section 2, as you refer to, pretty much means you can't congregate, say, in front of the door of a business and allow people to go in and out of that business. So you can think about maybe some kind of protest where they're blocking a sidewalk or blocking entrance to a business. So that's part of the concern. The real design of this ordinance is to prevent individuals who are on the hill really for the reasons of causing trouble, and they congregate in larger numbers. And police have got a difficult task sometimes with some of the behavior that occurs at, say, 2 o'clock in the morning. And so they're trying to move people along, and you sometimes have people that have to walk out into the street to get by these crowds, and sometimes these crowds are antagonizing people. So that's really the purpose of the ordinance. But I think you had another question that I don't remember exactly what you requested or asked.
No, I think you covered it. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
All right. Other questions from council? Okay, seeing none, I'll turn it over to the public. I saw that TJ Frine had a question, so I'll unmute you. And Mr. Frine, go ahead. Name and address for the record, please.
TJ Frine, 1319 Austin Way. Can you hear me okay?
You're fine. Thank you.
Okay, I moved my phone now, so away from the computer. I just have a question for the loitering, and I don't have the proposed ordinance in front of me. What would be the difference between that and disorderly conduct, Iowa Code 723.4, subsection 7, which basically prohibits blocking sidewalks or the road, blocking its lawful purpose, which would be to pass through and get by? What would be the difference there? That's all.
Okay, so I'll turn that over. Director Wilson, probably in the best spot to answer that.
Well, I don't have that ordinance in front, or that code in front of me. That's a state code, so I want to take a look at that and see exactly what that says. But I know we've had some county attorney opinions which have been a challenge for us in certain enforcement efforts. So this may address this. I know our city attorney looked at this, and we compared this to Dubuque, Iowa City, and other cities that have loitering ordinances, just to make sure we're doing the right thing to solve the problems that we have.
Okay. I'll open it up for Mr. Salentik. I see you, so I'm going to unmute you here, and name and address for the record, please, Mr. Salentik.
Jeremy Salentik, 1008 Rockland Street. Was going to make a comment about, that'd be a shame. I understand, more now what you're saying about basically getting rid of the troublemakers, but I mean, it'd be a shame to lose our street musicians. Being a musician myself, I often want to join in with them when they're down there playing. So another question about that is, do those street musicians need to get a permit from the city to be down there to play? That's all I got for you.
Okay, thank you. Director Olson.
I may need some help with this. I know you need a permit to sell anything like food vendors, but I don't believe you need a permit if you're just playing music on a street corner, as long as there's no request for funds. I think you can donate, as you frequently see, but if anyone wants to correct me on that, I believe that's correct.
It's Mr. Rogers.
Mayor, as long as there's no selling of goods or services, that's the main thing that triggered the permit. Someone performing would not require a permit.
Okay. And just as a question for Director Olson, with these kinds of ordinances, would there typically have to be a complaint from somebody in the public before the police officers would take action? Like, they're not just out patrolling looking for people standing typically?
Yeah, I would say in most circumstances that would be the case, particularly the entrance to a private business. But when it comes to some of the activity that we'll have, at 2 o'clock in the morning, there may be some action that the police would have to take, particularly if you have some antagonistic behavior or you have some individuals having to walk out in the street because there's a large enough crowd on the sidewalk that they're not allowing people to pass.
Okay, so if somebody says, I'm thinking of a street musician on downtown on Main Street, if it says in the ordinance that it's unlawful to congregate, loiter upon public property where it obstructs, hinders, and prevents another person from passing, would an officer just basically say, if somebody's in the way, just say, hey, can you move back a bit? You're not looking to cite people right away.
No, we've had problems in the past asking people to move, that larger groups, I should say, individuals, larger groups, and they refuse. And it's not to a point where maybe the disorderly would be appropriate. It's kind of fills a gap that we have, but it is not intended by any means to stop a group of individuals for standing and talking or socializing after they've left an establishment, or like some of them have suggested, the people playing music.
Yeah, a violinist playing at farmer's market or something like that. Okay. All right. Any other questions from council on this? Then, yes.
Is this the first of 3 readings?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So with that answered, any other questions? Seeing none, this requires a roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Yes.
Dara,
Aye.
Sires,
Aye.
Tiber,
Aye.
all voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. And item 25 is another ordinance. It's passing an ordinance amending Chapter 17, Parks and Recreation of the Code of Ordinances relative to noxious weeds upon its first consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and seconded. Open it up for council questions and discussion.
Mr. Mayor, Cruz.
Yes, Councilor Cruz, go ahead.
For a little clarity, the term noxious weeds, is that referring to a state-defined list, I believe, of certain weeds, or would that be anything other than grass? Just kind of curious on that.
Okay. Yes, and I'll turn it over to staff for questions. I think we had Jamie Castle had a few slides on this. Is that correct?
I do have a few slides on that. I don't have anything in regards to the list of the noxious weeds, but there is a state list of that, I believe, and we can look for that information for the next reading.
Well, to clarify, what I'm wondering is that anything that grows over 8 inches tall, and you maybe address this with the slides, needs to be trimmed to below 8 inches?
Yes, that's typically what we have been doing with the grass. There has been, for prairie grass, we have been working with Public Works, and you have to have a plan in place to have prairie grass, and it has to be maintained to be able to keep the prairie grass in place. And I can get more information on that, but I don't have that with me today to present information on prairie grass. But generally, it has to be kept 8 inches or less for any of the noxious weeds or grass.
Or any other type of weed, for that matter?
Correct.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And this is on the entirety of the lot, behind garages, I mean, everywhere in the lot, weeds to be held down. Weeds and grass and other growing things other than ornamental bushes, let's say, have to be 8 inches or less.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If you'd like, I'm gonna attempt to share my screen with you and show you the ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
All right. So do you guys see my screen there with the ordinance there?
Perfect, Jamie.
Good.
All right, so this is the 2 items that we are updating in this ordinance. The first is section B, and it was to update the to community development as an inspection services and in code enforcement. Initially, it was Public Works identified as the department that would be handling it, and is now moved into community development because that's where code enforcement is located. And so we are identifying the different department and members that would be handling it. So just simply changing those. And then the second section is the added section D, which is to add subsequent fines for repeat failure to destroy the noxious weeds and grass, and to deter reoccurrence of the city and have this of the city contractors mowing properties. Let's see if it's gonna change slides, and it's not. Hold on.
We'll bear with you.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I just had to use the right keyboard. So then the ordinance in that section D, I've highlighted kind of the important points. So once a nuisance has been abated the first time, so you get one, so the first time it's abated, that's just the regular, the cost of the mowing. The second time, the subsequent violation in a single calendar year will have a civil penalty. And so the first offense is $100, the second offense $500, and the third and subsequents are $1,000. And the reason that we want to add this municipal infraction to this is because we are having more and more repeat offenders where we go out and we have someone who has their grass and weeds that are more than 8 inches. We send the letter, we wait 7 days, it hasn't been mowed, we mow it. A neighbor calls and a complaint again. We measure the grass, it's above 8 inches. We wait the 7 days, they haven't mowed it, we have to mow it again. So we are almost becoming their lawn mowing service. So we're hoping that by adding the municipal infraction, it deters them from using us as their lawn mowing service in a sense. Last year we had 10 properties that we had to repeatedly mow, and we're hoping that this is the answer to that problem.
Okay.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen unless you want to look at this part anymore.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember David.
Could I ask Jamie a question? Over the last several months doing this, when you've had to go back, is it just them not wanting to do it, or is there a philosophical difference between what they see as an ornamental plant and we see as a noxious? I know we have a bit of a history in this community of one man's, weed is another person's flower.
We've had, I've got a list here from just 2019, and there were about 50% of them where they just didn't mow. We had the other 50% were trust properties, a hoarder property where they just were not maintaining the property, one where we couldn't find the owner of the property, or actually 3 of them were ones where we just couldn't even find the property owner.
So these are more like just a person's yard, not necessarily a planting area or a flower bed. Are these?
No, these are actually people's homes. It's the whole yard. It's the whole lot.
Okay. Thanks, Jimmy.
Councilmember Tiber, did you have a question still? Okay, sorry. Anyone else from council?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Councilmember Cruz.
This applies, I'm assuming, then to vacant lots and that sort of thing, or is there, depending where in the city, is there an allowance for alfalfa or clover or some sort of, it's not really native grass, but it's something besides Kentucky bluegrass to be planted and allowed to get taller? Somebody?
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I'll jump in because I was just quick while Jamie was presenting, pulling up the state list of noxious weeds. It's from chapter 317. And they list about 14 different noxious weeds, and none of what you mentioned shows up there. However, I guess we'd that's an agricultural purpose that you might be talking about. So that might be allowed in agriculturally zoned properties where R1 single family, we probably wouldn't be promoting planting alfalfa and letting that grow high.
Well, there was a case in some of the edges of the town to the west where the entire area hasn't been developed a whole lot. And there were some lots that were getting brome grass and various hay type of grasses growing that to me looked totally fine and typical of a large area with multiple lots not being developed. So I was wondering if there was some allowance for that instead of just mowing it, which seemed kind of senseless. I didn't know how we differentiated there.
We have been allowing that on some of the undeveloped lots, but what we've been doing is if there is a sidewalk or a trail, we've been asking them to mow a 3-foot strip so that there isn't any problems that a walker or runner might have along the trail, so that it's at least kept clean along the trail.
Okay, and then you mentioned native grass earlier. So the grasses and alfalfa, that could be considered native grass. Would that fit in that category, or is there some special seed? I know there is pollinator seeds and plantings and things like that, and you've got the monarch butterfly food milkweed that people will buy those plants and purposely plant those. And I think like Frank mentioned, where somebody's weed is somebody's flower, and the monarch butterfly likes that plant. So
Yep. So what we've been having Greg Reckord do, our code enforcement officer, is when it's in a garden bed, we tend to not worry too much about it. It's when it's at the entire lot. The other thing is we've had some lots where they have fought with us because they say that it's a prairie grass, but there's not been any maintenance of the prairie grass, and there's been a requirement for, prairies do require that. So we've been working with the arborist and asking him questions regarding how to maintain prairie and trying to get more information on that to make sure it's maintained properly. We don't want to work against that. It's not that we are uninterested in having prairie. We just want to make sure that if they do, it's maintained properly.
Sure. I guess I'm thinking from my years on the farm, if you have a what I would just call a hayfield properly planted with the various grasses, you won't get the horseweeds and pigweeds and things like that growing tall. You'll have what I would look at as a hayfield. And if that's necessarily considered, in my mind, it wouldn't be prairie plantings or prairie grass. It'd be a hayfield. And that would be more applicable to vacant lots that aren't developed to a great extent around it. That's what I'm thinking. If that's something we can incorporate possibly into the code, or
okay,
interested in that.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion from council on this? Okay, and I'll open, I don't think we had the public yet, have we? Okay, so I'll open it up to the public. Any questions or comments on this item? Yes, Mr. Salentic, go ahead.
Jeremy Slenick, 1008 Rockland Street. Anyway, agreeing with Frank there, that, yeah, one person's weed is another person's flower. And I can think of a property out here in North Cedar where there is a lady who her entire front yard is a flower bed. But these are officially flowering flowers and not just like some prairie grass or something like that. And she's got a nice little path that goes all the way through her yard. But on the other hand, I enjoy her yard. My wife would not like to live next door to her yard because she thinks it's overkill. So there is a question of, where you draw the line on that stuff. So I'm done with that. That's my comment. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Slank. Any other speakers from public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to council. Final questions or comments on this first item for consideration?
Mr. Mayor, order.
Yes, Mr. Cyrus, go ahead.
Just seems like the fines are a little bit exorbitant, $1,000 for each time it's mowed. That seems like quite a bit if it was more like 500, because it seems like some of these properties, when they said they were in a trust or things like that, it's almost, we could look into something else where they would be maintained. But to start to go out and measure grass at 8 inches high seems like might be harassment. And I follow along with everybody else where some people do like their lawns a little longer, but that's just what I was thinking. Thanks.
Ms. Castle, can you clarify what the tier order is for the fines?
I use it's just the municipal infractions, and so I took the penalties directly from section 1.9, and so the first offense, so the first time that it's at the 8 inches, there's no fine other than the fee to have your lawn mowed. And so honestly, it depends on the size of your lawn and the amount of time that our contractor takes. The second offense, that's when it's the $100. So it's actually, the first time it's the cost of the lawn mowing, the second time it's the 100, the third time it's the 500. So it's would actually be the fourth time that you have to have your lawn mowed, that would be $1,000.
Yep, and that's on top of the cost of the mowing itself.
On top of the cost of the mowing.
All right. Councilor Dale.
Right.
Oh, any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Hardy.
And the point of clarification that this is within 1 year, correct? All within 1 year, and then the next year it starts over. Not that you want to have this happen over and over.
Yes, it would be all within 1 calendar year, so you'd get a fresh start the next year.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Seeing and hearing none, this requires a roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Miller.
Aye.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Harding.
Aye.
Dara.
Aye.
Sires.
No.
Tiber.
Aye.
6 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us out of ordinances and into bills and payroll. Item 26 is allowing bills and payroll of April 20th. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
And seconded, and this requires a roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
Miller.
Aye.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Harding.
Yes.
Dara.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye.
Tiber.
Aye. Sorry, Dave.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. That takes us out to council referrals. We had discussed earlier the idea of potentially a work session or something to change the process going forward for the timeline. Is there a motion that someone wants to bring forward regarding that? You can think about it for a few seconds. How you might want to word that.
Mr. Porter?
Yes, Mr. Sires, go ahead.
I don't know if this would be under a referral or whether this would be under an update. Just want to give a shout out to the Lions Club. They went out and picked up along Green.
That'd be under council updates. So
okay, sorry, I'll wait.
That's what we're on. No.
Maybe,
yes, Councilmember Harding, I saw you.
Yeah, a referral to wait until the national emergency is over to select the next police chief, so that we can have a meet and greet in person.
Next. And I'll ask Mr. Rogers, for this council referral, it sounds like this is a request for maybe a staff action rather than a council meeting or a referral to a committee. Is that allowed?
No, there'd have to be a referral to have staff report back with an item for the council to act on.
So
right now, we're not, this wouldn't be appropriate for council, for instance, take up that matter, pass that motion. I'd call it directive to staff because it wasn't an agenda item. So technically the best way to do it is refer to staff. Staff comes back with a proposed timeline council debates it, and then comes with a resolution directing staff to adopt a different timeline. I would tell you, however, though, that under the ordinances, the discretion to bring that forward lies with the public safety director. And so council could make its wishes known in some sort of encouragement for staff to delay bringing that forward. But council in its own ordinance has delegated the authority, the discretion to bring that forward with the public safety director, to the city administrator, to you, Mr. Mayor, to the council. So that's been delegated by ordinance.
Well, the process has been delegated, but has the timeline been necessarily delegated?
Sure, because if one has the discretion on the candidate, certainly one has the discretion as the timing of it. I'm not saying that council can't make its feelings known on its preference on when this recommendation comes forward for approval.
Interesting.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Yes,
one of the things that from a timing perspective, I understand we're under some constraints with regard to the COVID-19, and there's a number of those things, but we have 3 candidates on an approved list right now that obviously these 3 candidates were looking for a chief's job. I would say that they're probably going to continue to look for a chief's job as they move forward. So if we really want to take advantage of what we feel is the best candidate, I would at least like to keep moving the process forward so we don't necessarily lose one of them.
Any council discussion on, well, I guess we need a
Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
has there been any concern voiced by any of the candidates that they don't have the opportunity for a meet and greet, that sort of thing, or are they comfortable with the process during the partial shutdown of the nation?
Mr. Mayor, point of order, don't we need a second?
Well, I don't know if we've even had a motion come forward on this yet, so.
Doing plenty of discussing.
Yeah. Council, I don't have a good answer for this one, how we proceed.
I agree with Mr. Miller. There's been no motion put forward, or if it's sort of one, there's been no second of the comment by Mr. Cedar, or
absence of
Harding.
Yeah, so I'll just say in absence of a motion, we wouldn't be able to continue discussion on this. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Rogers.
Right. We
would need to have something to debate.
Right.
Typically. So I know it was partly brought forward by Councilmember Harding. We'll entertain a motion, or I'll ask you if you wish to bring forward a motion. You're welcome to.
I don't know how to word it. Where I guess I don't necessarily have a motion. I want staff to be able to continue to move forward and do what they're doing. I just would like to be known that I think while there are pros to moving forward with the 3 on the list, that there are a lot of pros to waiting as well.
Again, we get into actually discussing that. So, motion
to talk about.
Councilmember Dara, please.
Good.
It seemed that when Jeff presented earlier, and I think Kevin supported Jeff's presentation, that he basically is fulfilling his obligation through our existing ordinance. So to me, the only motion that we'd make tonight is not to do anything different except to wait for until the virus is gone to have a meet and greet or something. So if it's about getting to know whoever it just seems to me Jeff's done his due diligence. We've gone through the process. It's now time for him to make his recommendation. because I don't know that even if we had a second, if there's much we could do about it. You know, we could prolong the event more than anything else, but Jeff still is going to make his recommendation, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Mr. Rogers, would the thing we could do then in this case to stay in with council rules, would it be appropriate for each council member, if they have a strong preference one way or another, to communicate that directly to the administrator?
Well, individual council members are always free to talk to staff about any topic they wish, as long as there's no material meeting that's accomplishing that. That's all. And I'm sure Jeff is open to visiting with council members about these matters.
And excuse me, but I think I heard Jeff say earlier that he even wonders if that waiting a little while, you know, the timing of this isn't all that great. So let's leave it, you know, Jeff has his job to do, but let's let him pick. Does he want to wait a couple of weeks or several weeks until the timing is better, but kind of move on through the process without letting him set the timeline rather than us. I think that's where I feel like we're at.
Well,
yeah, I have no motion.
Okay, so there's no motion on this. And any other items for council referral? We didn't have any in the packet. Okay.
Somewhere down the line, I'd like to just have kind of staff provide an overview of our greenways and our flood projects and that kind of thing. It's a pretty important part of the history of this community, and I think of its future as well. And the more we can do each of these projects on dry run and other water-related projects, be a part of a bigger set of goals that we have. So somewhere along the line, kind of bringing the council up to speed as to where we're at and where we want to go. Does that make sense?
Is there a motion is there a motion for that?
Whatever I said. Yes, that's a motion. Just to continue the discussion about our flood mitigation, all of that, water quality, and how Dry Run Creek fits in that, and where we're at. You know, what do we currently have in place that guides our decision making?
With that, so that sounds like a committee of the whole referral then.
Yeah. And not a big rush, but I think it's good to bring it up periodically.
I'm kind of leading you toward getting a motion out, Councilmember Dara. So is there? I can't give you the motion. You have to
make a motion to refer review of sensitive land ordinances, our stormwater collection strategy, and so one other thing. Staff and their daily duties as it relates.
Okay, as a committee of the whole?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second from Councilmember Dara. Is there any further discussion on that?
Certainly. Is that going to cause a lot of extra work on the part of the staff?
I don't know how much extra. I think to me there's quite a bit already there. And I'm not looking, I want that down the road. I realize we got a lot of other stuff happening right now. I just don't want to lose sight of it, that a lot of those decisions impact future development in our community and quality of life. And I think those are important things to talk about. We've got a couple new council members who have not participated in that discussion. And so when the timing is right, I just wanted to get it on the table. It doesn't have to be next week. So, when the dust settles or the water dries up or whatever.
I would definitely echo Susan's concern about staff taxation here. And I suggest that we maybe look at what Amy Kay presented. Boy, this must have been about 5 years ago. Here, Amy Kay. And it was really an excellent presentation, and maybe just dusting that off would be sufficient.
Okay, and if that's possible, it's available on a city video. If we recorded it, that might be a good item to place on YouTube as well, just so the rest of us can see that. And maybe an additional council meeting isn't required. It's all contained in that video. Does that sound all right?
Mayor, I think maybe this would be a good timing. Just kind of a real quick update. We're continuing forward with the climate action plan and talking about that. This may be a big component of that. with regard to some of the things that we'll do with waterways and sensitive areas and all of that. So that may be a nice timing as we move forward with that.
Okay, thank you. So it's been motioned and seconded. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Oh, wait.
As a question first, do you actually need the referral if it's already going to be in this presentation that Ron talked about?
It's up to council.
So I'll withdraw the motion with the understanding that Director Gaines and his team will review this item or these related items in the future presentation related to the climate action plan.
Okay.
So motion to, I rescind my motion.
And I'll rescind my second.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and as we go through this, we're just following Robert's rules as best we can. I'm grateful for the discussions. This is fantastic. So, yes, Councilmember Cruz.
I would have another potential referral, and I was going to wait till updates, but my understanding in the updates, we can't take action. My concern is on an email that just came out announcing the closing of the transfer station, but leaving the recycling drop-off center open. I'm opposed to this, as I've gotten email.
This needs to be a referral. This is a referral period, so if you have a motion.
I'd like to make okay. I'll make a motion that we do not close the transfer station as we're not closing the recycling portion.
And I'm getting a head shake from Mr. Rogers. I don't believe we can do that tonight.
No, it wasn't an agenda item, so council cannot act to direct staff to reopen. So it could be a referral to report back in committee or council with being part of the COVID-19 update.
Okay. And Councilmember Cruz, I'll talk about this, and staff will talk a little bit about this too, because I also have some questions about authorities and who's allowed to open and close. So that might be just a discussion item for that council updates, if that's
okay. I can wait for 10 seconds and do it as an update.
All right. So no further referrals I'm seeing. Okay, I will move it over to first our UNI student liaison update. So we have, hopefully, Rebecca Averly still here with us. Rebecca, I have you available to talk. Wanted just to get a chance for you to comment on the overall what's happening at UNI right now so the public knows. And also to wish you farewell since this is your final council meeting with us tonight.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. UNI students have been going through a lot of changes over the past few weeks with implementing and following social distancing measures. Due to COVID-19, students have switched to all online classes to complete the rest of the semester. This will also be carrying through for summer classes, so they will also all be online. The 2020 spring graduation ceremony has also been canceled. However, students are encouraged to participate in the fall 2020 commencement if they choose to do so. UNI students and staff have also been involved with making and collecting protective gear and equipment, such as making plastic face shields with 3D printers and collecting personal protective equipment and sewing protective masks to donate. So that's something fun that's kind of happening on campus to help the community out. And yeah, I think that's all that I have. I'll probably still be listening in on these council meetings, and I'll let you know as we move forward if there's going to be another city council liaison and how we move forward on that way. But I've had a great time just coming in and being very welcomed here in Cedar Falls and to the council. So thank you for all that.
Thank you, Ms. Everly. She'll be staying here until December. She's supposed to graduate December of this year, finishing up an undergrad in public administration. So we're very glad to have you with us, Ms. Everly.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Great job.
Great job.
Okay, with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Gaines for staff updates.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Cruz.
Order, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Cruz?
Do we get to talk about council updates? You went to staff update.
Yeah, good point of order. Thank you. So I need to go back into council updates. I apologize for that, Mr. Gaines. So council updates.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Sires.
I just wanted to give a shout out to the Lions Club. They went out and picked up litter along Green Hill Road. I think that's awesome, where somebody sees something that needs to be done, jumps on it, gets it done. I got a big thank you for them. That's what makes our community such a great place to live. Also, Brian Heath and the Public Works people out there are working hard. And even with this COVID stuff, they're keeping their distance and they're doing a great job also. I just wanted to thank all those people out there and the office people. But the Lions Club, awesome job. I appreciate it. That's all.
Good job, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Cyrus. Yes, and Councilmember Cruz.
The discussion I started a little earlier is responding to an email that just came out at 4:30 tonight announcing the closing of the transfer station, but not closing the recycling drop-off center in regards to the COVID-19 and distancing and that sort of thing. A concern was brought to my attention regarding that by a citizen, and I agree wholeheartedly that you have situations where citizens are at home doing things to their homes. They're not just going to watch TV. They're going to clean their house, remodel, what have you. They go to Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, buy materials, repair things, and they have debris to get rid of. And it states in the email that you still have pickup of bulk items like refrigerators and what have you at the curb, but the curbside pickup is not designed for construction debris. And it's not designed for bags of garbage that would fit into your normal garbage tub. So I think it's important that we keep the transfer station open, and to be able to do so or pretty much negate this email that announces it closing tomorrow already. I don't know the procedure to do that, but I think it's very important because garbage pickup is an essential service. And just the nature of what's happening, people are doing things at home and cleaning house and what have you. So if I need to open up a discussion for that or how to proceed with hoping to keep the transfer station open. And another point, recycling, there's more congestion in the recycling area. I've been in there when there's 4 or 5 people dropping off cans and newspapers and things like that, as opposed to if I drop off a refrigerator, I'm by myself in the back by the metal section dropping off a refrigerator. Nobody's there to catch a cold. So what can we do to keep that open? That's what I'd like to know.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to Mr. Gaines if you'd want to, or Mr. Schrag, you'd want to comment on the reason for the closure.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm glad Mr. Cruz brought this up. There's actually 3 items that I was going to bring up with the council tonight and just try to get a feeling on where you are with a number of these closures. The transfer station would be one of them. Pickleball courts is another, and then also the public restroom. And one of the reasons I talk about this is because we're getting phone calls from the public both ways with regard to, hey, we see a number of people down at the pickleball court. You need to get them out of there or close the pickleball courts. We'll also get an email that say, hey, I went down there and the nets were down, so why did you have it closed? So, you know, when you start to look at what other communities are doing and what we want to do here, you know, we're trying to manage our way the best we can as a staff, but ultimately that is from the council. And really what I wanted to get a sense from you folks tonight is, okay, if out of those 3 items, are you fine with maintaining them to be open, or you know, by consensus, would you rather staff close them? So I think that's really kind of a, you know, we can take those one at a time, but and I know the mayor and I have talked about a number of these as well.
Right. I'll ask too for Mr. Rogers, is there any concern about us or the council discussing their preferences if it's not taken as a vote? Can we have that dialogue about this item tonight?
Absolutely have the dialogue, but there can be no formal vote and no formal directive. Council can talk about it and talk about their preferences, okay. However.
So even there, it's not that you would count for a consensus. you would just get the opinions, correct?
Yeah, a discussion and find out where council's at on these items is perfectly fine.
Excellent. And just for the public, it's important to do it at this time because there's not really another opportunity or appropriate opportunity under the open meetings law for the council to have these kinds of discussions. As we said earlier, they can individually send their preferences to the administrator or to me, but this is really the one opportunity we have for them to come together and between themselves come to good ideas and some opinions towards staff on some of these items. So thank you for bearing with us on what's a really important topic. So I'll open it up for council. Or Mr. Gaines, did you want to go one at a time for the items? How do you want to proceed on this?
I think it might be just, I don't want to drag this out too long, Mr. Mayor. I know it's already 9:15, but I do think it's important. I do have some other things just briefly that I go in to for a COVID update, but as long as we're on this with regard to the facilities right now, I'd like to hear the thoughts on the transfer station. I know what we were looking at is some of the congestion that we were having and the interaction with our employees and the citizens. And in order to protect both, what we were hoping is just to close that with regard to the recycling portion of it and leaving the recycling open is we're hoping to folks to obey the social distancing. We could close that particular location, but that would put pressure onto some of our remote locations also.
Okay, and Mr. Tiber?
I was just going to offer some thoughts. As it relates to the transfer station, I would definitely echo Councilman Cruz's thoughts. With safety first in mind, of course. So, for example, maybe we eliminate cash transactions and only do contactless credit card transactions with special attention to cleaning and hygiene, both in and out, while minding all the social distancing. Mayor, I also appreciate your note. And of course, you got my response on the pickleball courts. That's an activity, tennis included, that many same household individuals can, safely play so long we're not violating the standards and guidelines set by the state. So I think in every instance, that's only two. We should think of creative ways in order to, continue to serve the public as much as possible while maintaining a safe and productive work environment. And I could probably list a couple other ideas, but I'll leave those thoughts for staff.
Okay, other thoughts from council?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, I can't tell who that is. Sorry.
That's all right.
Whoever speaking.
Simon.
Yes, go ahead. Ms. Ready?
I would echo what Councilor Cruz and Tiber said about the transfer station. I think we should find creative ways to keep that open for people to be able to utilize that. The pickleball is a little bit of a toss-up. I think it should either be fully closed and done or fully open. I don't think it should just be open with no net. The argument for keeping it open would be what Mr. Tiber said, that there are people in the same households that could utilize it. So my thought would be at this moment in time to leave it open and put the responsibility on the people that they socially distance and follow the guidelines. And I don't see that we have extreme enough cases to close that now. And there was a third one, Mr. Gaines.
Yeah, the public restrooms in the parks and trails, we're really strongly recommending that we close that. We can only get out there about twice a week for each one for a cleaning. So I don't know that's going to be a safe situation no matter what.
I could go with that. So I would go with that. And
I'll ask also, would anyone on council have a concern with closing or with keeping the pickleball courts open, that you would have an opinion strongly to close them? Seeing none. With transfer station, is that?
Mr. Mayor, can I make a comment on that then? if there's not a convenient place for people to dump their debris, there's going to be, I guess, the opposite of dumpster diving. It'll be dumpster dumping throughout town. And it's very common for people to get rid of stuff if they find a spot and there's a dumpster sitting. I can attest to that. But I'm kind of puzzled on the transfer station. There's a glass shield with separating the reception person from the customer, and you slide money under a little tray type of thing. And that's similar to what many retail stores in town have set up. You know, I can think of.
Actually, aren't they just taking credit cards at the transfer station? I didn't think they were taking cash anymore.
Well, not recently, but I've paid cash before. But
I know, but the last time I was there was a credit card, I think.
Mr. Gaines, is that credit card only, right?
That's correct. It's been that way for at least a week.
Okay, so that part's solved.
So what I'm hearing, Mr. Mayor, what I'm hearing is we'll go ahead, keep the transfer station open, open up the pickleball courts, but close the restrooms.
Could we at least encourage people to wear masks? I mean, at least ask them to. I mean, you can't
always, yeah, absolutely should be encouraging people to wear masks. It's not something that's a state mandate, so we can't require it.
Some kind of signage that would say keep your distance. And
masks are strongly encouraged. Yeah, and as you know, have our own. Keep it handy and wear it when you're too, as an example. Okay, so that covers that part.
Mr. Mayor, I have one follow-up question, if I may.
Go ahead.
Regarding the public restrooms, I'm wondering, have we seen a higher usage of those because more people are walking and that's their form of recreation? Then they decide, well, I need to use the restroom, and they're dirtier, possibly. It might be counterproductive to promoting some sort of outside activity to get out of the house. I don't know, just the background of, you know, are they dirtier recently, or is the personnel to clean them, or where are we at with that? Mr. Gaines?
I'd be happy to comment on that too. As far as the cleanliness of the restrooms, it's really hard to tell if somebody's got a virus on them and it's on a door handle. You're not going to see whether it's clean or dirty. So I would say it doesn't matter so much the number of use. It's the fact that it's being used and that it's being shared among multiple people who are strangers. So that's why I would think it should be closed.
I would echo Mr. Mayor's comments there that it's hard to determine the use. Obviously, we don't know who goes in and out of there at what hours of the day. Obviously, our seasonal restrooms that are only open during the summer have not been opened up yet this spring, and we plan to not open those until this virus passes. But we're talking about the restrooms that are open all year round, so it's difficult to determine the usage, but we are seeing increased numbers recreational-wise, obviously out on the trail system.
Kind of a really.
Okay. So it sounds like we have answers for those. There was also a question about dog parks. As now, from talking with Mr. Gaines, the dog parks are open and city's monitoring to see if people are keeping a distance. I've been out the last couple of days just driving around town, and every so often I'll just drive by the dog park and look at it. I'm seeing people are keeping a distance. So at least from my own experience, my limited experience looking, people seem to be following the protocols. They don't want to lose that right to use the facility. So I have no concerns at this time about keeping the dog park open. Would anyone else have concerns with keeping it open? Okay. So that's dog park, golf course. Also is something that Mr. Gaines and staff and I talked about, where people can keep a distance. It's not necessary that they're going to, but they do have the physical ability to stay separate from each other, where you might not have that in, say, a swimming pool or other places that the governor closed down. So whereas other cities have shut down their golf course, there's a decision from within staff to keep it open while still monitoring and making sure that people are maintaining a distance. again, from my own perception, what I've seen from driving around, people have largely been obeying. Once in a while, I'll see two people on the green together. I can't tell if those people are members of the same family. Sometimes one's quite a bit taller than another. But for the most part, it looks like people are understanding the intent of the proclamation and they're obeying, and they don't want to lose the ability to use that course. So staff, does staff have any comment or any concerns about it, or council?
I played golf on Sunday with family, and my observations were the same. Again, I think a lot of this just relies on the good, behavior and voluntary interactions of individuals. They seem to be doing the right thing. The golf course has taken measures. Applaud the pro, Mr. Bermel, for putting little foam slots so we don't have to interact with flags. And I'd say it's a pretty contactless sport right now. So keep it open. Like pickleball. I think people can do this responsibly.
Excuse me, are they limiting the number of people in the clubhouse at a time?
The clubhouse is closed.
Okay.
It's just a window transaction in order to pay. Yeah.
Okay.
It seems to be well run. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Stragi, would you have any extra comments on that or insight?
Not particularly. I know that the city attorney reviewed our contract with Mr. Bermel today, and the contract likely precludes the city from acting unilaterally on the operation of the golf course, as long as they're keeping, the governor's proclamation and they're enforcing it out there. So.
Because that proclamation did not take action on golf courses specifically. So being as it's run as a private entity with that contract, it really takes it out of some of the city's hands for even making some of those changes.
So, bathrooms are closed too, so people are adapting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tiber. Was there anything else that's a closure or potentially closed right now, or we should discuss? Anything from council that we haven't addressed already?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Miller, go ahead.
More directed for Chief Olson. Is there any side of the enforcement that has changed here in Cedar Falls with the latest from the governor, or how are we addressing that I've heard several rumors from surrounding communities that tickets are being issued and people are being told to go home. How are we addressing it here?
Well, we've probably had 25, maybe 30 complaints from businesses being open that shouldn't be to people congregating where they shouldn't be. I am not aware. What we've done is we've established a warning booklet, and where we're tracking all of these calls. And we're offering a warning to the first violation, and then the follow-up would be a citation. As of mid to end of last week, we haven't issued any citations. Most of the complaints, that we received were false. The business either was complying or the individuals were complying, but we've had a few where we've had to have the business close or have had to move some people along. But for the most part, people are doing a pretty good job.
Thank you.
Okay, so anything else on the public comment end that we need to discuss? Oh, actually, one thing I had a question or comment about was there have been a couple of requests from the public about having campers and RVs out. One, to try to self-distance if they're allowed to use those campers in their yard. And another is if people can't go out camping in the public in the next couple of weeks and it's a nice night out, they want to know if they're allowed to do any camping in their yard. And so I asked Director Sheets if she could just give us a quick a blurb on that as a city ordinance issue.
Sure, Mayor. Yep, we took a look at the ordinance, and it is permitted to have yard camping, whether you do that with a tent or a camper or in a car or anything like that. It is allowed up to 30 days on a property. There are provisions if it's in a floodplain where we'd have to review that and maybe talk about that a little bit more, but in general, throughout the community, it's permitted up to 30 days.
Okay, thank you. All right, so any other items that you have for staff updates, Mr. Gaines?
I'll just run through some of my notes with regard to what I had with one of the things I thought we would do is maybe just touch where we are here as a state. I think the new cases here recently have gone up quite a bit. I think the last 4 days we've received 191, 181, 389, 257 new cases within the state of Iowa. So, and what the research that talking with Jack Dusenberry, some of the other folks around the community, and what some of the projections are, it looks like here in Iowa, we're really not going to see the peak of this thing until May 5th through the 10th sometime. So we've still got a lot of things to go. The peak typically would end up being about half. And, you know, in this community, we have some retirement facilities that are very vulnerable. I think Tyson, just going back to Tyson last week, was kind of how some of this can go. From a staffing perspective, where possible, we have a lot of our staff that's working from home. We have staff that's rotating on a rotating basis. Unfortunately, we do have essential workers that will have to continue to come and perform all of their duties at home, and I think that's going pretty well. With regard to the 3 facilities that are still open for the majority of staff is City Hall, Public Works, and Public Safety. We've started actually taking individuals' temperatures as they come into the building. One of the things that's held us up from doing that a little bit sooner is just the purchasing of thermometers. I still don't think we have all of the things that we need here at City Hall. Public Safety has been having that practice in place for a couple weeks now. Also, have been encouraging staff to wear masks. I know that we have some staff are wearing the cloth masks. We have some of the, for lack of a better term on my part, the surgical type masks that will be coming in. We're not doing the N95 mask. So one of the other things that we are trying to anticipate, just if it happens, if we get some type of an outbreak within our city facilities, what's going to be the protocol for cleaning the building, and Director Schrage is getting some of those in place. And then kind of just as a little bit of a wrap up with regard to staff is starting to put together a plan or some type of protocol on how we're going to reopen. I would imagine some of these things is just not going to be flip the lights on some morning. So we'll really be putting that plan together and looking at where we're going. I think everybody received the email that I sent out last week with regard to some of our funding sources and some of our projects. We as staff have been meeting and looking at those funding sources. Now, 2 things. The first one is with regard to those funding sources, we are going to know a lot more in 6 to 8 months on what the effects of this are with regard to especially hotel motel, road use tax being quote unquote the gas tax, and then also our local option sales tax. Those 3 funding sources we're definitely going to see a dip in those. I don't want to make it sound dire because typically with all of the projects that we have within the CIP, those particular funding sources, we do have the funding on hand. So that's a good thing, and that's just because of the practices that the council's had in the past with regard to budgeting and putting together the CIP. One of probably the biggest challenge is going to be some of our Blackhawk Gaming dollars that we have moving forward. 3 projects within the CIP is going to be about $2.5 million. So the second thing that I'd like to kind of address is once we're on the May 4th council meeting, we are probably going to be bringing a proposal on projects that may be affected that we're going to recommend pushing back for the year and moving forward. What we're looking at is just projects that will be affected this year. 6 to 8 months as we start that CIP process and we know more, we'll actually start adjusting those dollars and those projects within there. So that's just a real quick overview of some of the things that we've been looking at with regard to the budgeting and project and keeping that moving forward. So
Well, thank you, Mr. Gaines.
that's what I have, Mr. Mayor, unless there's questions.
Sure. Any questions from council on that? Okay, seeing none. I did want to also quickly note what the authorities are for the administrator and me, at least how I view them. There's sometimes some question about closing facilities, how that operates, who's responsible for it. And just for the public's edification and council and staff, we're going off of this book. It's the multi-hazard emergency operations plan. In that book, or I should say, in the city ordinances, the council specifically named the administrator as the person responsible for executing the emergency operations plan. It's not the mayor. So in the guidebook where it talks about changes to the government's operation and city closures and things like that, as I understand it, as Mr. Gaines, I hope understands it, that's been delegated to him by the council rather than to me. So I have not been in a position to make those kinds of decisions about what buildings should be open or closed. When I did it that first day when we looked to shut down a couple of buildings to the public, I didn't have that authority, it turned out. It really was, it happened anyway, but I realized I didn't have, I think so, a council member noting it. That was outside my authority unless there was a declared public emergency. We've not declared a public emergency in Cedar Falls because it appears that we can get the decisions made that we need to within a reasonable amount of time. And I would see that emergency proclamation to be more appropriate for the mayor if it was something like a tornado or another fast-moving national or a local disaster where I had to do things very quickly. Here, like at this meeting tonight and deciding what should be open or closed, it seems like we can get those decisions made without me needing to take that authority. But just want to be clear that those things, if there's questions about whether buildings should be open or closed, I'll continue to reach out to council and ask your preference. And then I'll be talking with the administrator. And since he's the one who's responsible under this guidebook for the openings and closings, he'll be the one to make those announcements. If the council wants to see it any differently, let me know. But that's how I understand we're going through the book on that. So any questions about that? Okay, it's tricky. I don't think we've had to use this book in quite a while. So we're kind of building it out as we go and getting our understandings, but certainly open to comments and feedback on that, how to make that process run better.
I think the last time we pulled the book out would have been 2016 for the flood.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Adair, you're muted for a moment. You want to unmute yourself?
Probably not a bad thing that I'm muted, but I just wanted to thank the staff. We don't see a lot of you because you're working so hard, but you really do have, you're charged with making some very difficult decisions. From what I can see, you're doing a great job. Just stay safe and however you can, let your staff that are still working hard every day know how much the council appreciates what they do. I can't imagine what your lives have been like, and mine's been pretty boring, but it doesn't sound like yours is. So, but keep up the good work and thanks for it.
Thank you. Thanks for acknowledging that. We've got a great team and they put a lot of hours in and a lot of hard work and making some difficult decisions as well. So thankful for them.
Yeah. It's also a good time to note that this week is Admin Professionals Week for both city staffs and private staffs around the country. So thank you to all of our admin staff and professionals who are going through this really difficult time and making it more manageable for all of us. So I have one last item, just as a housekeeping item from earlier tonight. In one of the items for the police chief discussion, Mr. Sharp had spoken, and he's a city employee. It says in part 10 of the of admin rules number 7, it's under section 4, page 12, if you're following along at home. It says, to avoid violating adopted personnel policies, Iowa law, and Iowa collective bargaining laws, employees and collective bargaining groups will not be recognized to speak about employment issues, or should be employment-related issues during city council meetings. employees and collective bargaining groups should utilize the process as specifically defined and granted by Iowa code and adopted city personnel policies. As I read this as the presiding officer, I see this as being related, like items that are related to their own specific employment. So we certainly know that a city employee could talk about snow plowing or shoveling or other things dealing with city services. In this case, this police chief position isn't related to the collective bargaining or that own person's employment status or capabilities with the city. So looking at it, I would allow it based on how I'm reading the intent of this provision, because it then says that for talking about these items, they should use the processes specifically defined and granted by Iowa code and city personnel policies. And there's just not a code or policy related to this kind of topic if they're talking about something else in the city, like a remediation kind of approach. So if city council has concerns about that, you certainly have the right to overrule me. As with a majority vote, you can decide to view it another way, and I would have to stop. But I don't see that I violated the rules tonight on that. And I wanted to explain both to council and to the public why I felt that way.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Miller?
Can we get, can Attorney Rogers give some background on that? I guess I can see your point, and I appreciate your clarification on it, but I also see Councilman Tivers in that a firefighter that's on administrative leave, the hiring of a public safety director or assistant public safety director is absolutely coinciding with their role in our community right now. So I guess I'd like Attorney Rogers to offer some background.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Mayor, in this particular case, my understanding is that the position to be hired is not only police chief, but assistant public safety director, which would be straight in the line of command for a firefighter. No question that the firefighters currently on leave are still employees. Mm-hmm. So had I been asked on that point of order, I would have advised Mr. Mayor that the speaker should not continue.
Because of the fact that it's not just a police chief, but it's the assistant public safety director, is that right?
In chain of command, correct.
Okay, fair enough. All right, thank you. I concede the point. Appreciate it. So that said, is there anything else under staff updates or anything we need to talk about tonight before we open to public comment, or excuse me, public forum? Okay, so I will now turn. Yes, go ahead.
Mayor, I think you were going to maybe make an announcement on one of our employees, Mr.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So it's odd in this timing and the ability what we have tonight, but we do want to recognize Fire Chief John Bostwick for 40 years of service tonight. So that's worth a round of applause. I'll allow it.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Yeah, we will have more of a formal ceremony once the pandemic lifts, and we'll include that in with a few other celebrations and notes over at the Public Safety Building. The City Council will be invited to that. We'll give you.
He might be up to 41 by then.
All right. Thank you very much. And so with that, I appreciate bringing that back up, Mr. Gaines. I forgot about that. Anything else from council or staff? Okay, so we'll go to public forum. And in the public forum, speakers will have one opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on topics germane to city business. So is there anyone from the public wishing to speak tonight? You can press *9 or, there we are. Yep, so we got *9 or the raise your hand. So I'll start with Mr. Frine. So go ahead and unmute. You have 5 minutes, up to.
Just a couple, I guess, suggestions more than anything. I trust in the interview process and what we've got going on with civil service is pretty standard. I would just like to add or suggest maybe that we look at, since we're very big into partnering with College Hill, that maybe we get them involved in the interview process as well, because that seems to be, I guess, the hotbed topic for Cedar Falls law enforcement is what are we doing on College Hill? And I think that loitering ordinance kind of tends to lean that way a little bit. We also have the University of Northern Iowa, try to get them involved. I know they have their own police department, but they also have a ton of students living off campus and around campus. So I think maybe getting them involved in the process, just kind of as outsiders as well. Then there's obviously the NAACP and a whole list of other organizations that I know traditionally that other local agencies have got involved in the hiring process as well. I just have a hard time with city staff scoring other city staff members in interviews, because obviously, I mean, it just, I'm not saying that there is bias, but there is potential there. I feel like that it leans that way, or can give the public perception that can exist. Just going down the clearly marked roadways. I know they talked about painting earlier. It's super important, not only for motorists and travelers, but for police department or the police officers investigating traffic collisions and that sort of thing, to be able to document, the clearly markings and the ease of the painting, just for investigation's sake. Down the road, I think it's super important to make sure those are painted and everything's well marked, just for the ease of those investigations. Just going down. Oh, I noticed it a while back, but I never said anything. There was a garbage can along one of the trails that was kind of secured to one of the marking poles. I'm so grateful for that. That is super nice. So I do appreciate that. It wasn't there last year, and it is this year. So thanks for that. Along those lines, kind of what is the plan for when it gets warmer? I mean, we can expect people to stay home for so long. It's easy when it's 40 degrees out and rainy or super windy for people to want to stay home. But the second it hits, 70 or over 60 consistently, we're going to have a little bit more of a enforcement problem, I feel like. Not that that's a bad thing, but that people are getting out. But I just think that there's got to be a plan in place for that. The signed proclamation to close Tyson's, I know Mr. Mayor signed on to that. I just question whether or not that was a personal opinion or how was that guided. I'm not for or against. I don't have enough information to decide for myself whether or not Tyson should be open or closed. It's hard for me to have our mayor sign on to something without much public input, if any at all. And I don't know how much city staff was involved with that. So that's all I got. I hope you guys are staying safe and staying healthy.
Oh, goodness. Just a second here. Yeah, thank you. And I can answer that for the letter sign-ons. That was the elected officials individually and not taking action on the part of the city.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Miller?
Can we get a clarification again? I believe Chief Olson mentioned this, but Mr. Frine had mentioned that city staff scored these folks, and I don't believe that to be the case at this point.
Okay, yes, thanks, Councilmember Maryland. Director Olson, if you'd like to comment on that?
Well, for the civil service certification process, there was the questionnaire, and then there was the interview process, and it was members of city staff that did score those.
Okay.
And those scores were submitted to the civil service.
Gotcha. Okay.
And as follow-up, is it appropriate or is it possible that an outside group like, say, College Hill Partnership could be part of that civil service process? Is that allowed under the rules, or does it have to only be city staff?
I would have to look at the code or refer to Attorney Rogers at this point. But this is a process, and we're certainly always looking at ways to improve the process. But this is the process that, and I think Director Rodenbeck mentioned that we've been following for a dozen years or more. But we certainly look at ways to improve the process.
And Mr. Rogers, would you have any extra on that?
I too would have to check the local Civil Service Commission rules on makeup of interviewers. So I'm not sure about that. I don't know that it's necessarily confined to staff, but I don't want to comment without checking.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor, one of the things I just wanted to point out is that.
Oops, you're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry, Mayor. One of the things I wanted to point out is, when information about staff and scoring this is this reminder that this is just to get candidates on the list. This isn't the selection of the candidates. So oftentimes, when we talk about getting other parties involved, just a reminder, this is again only to create the list of the candidates.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask a question?
Yes, Mr. Cruz.
When they talk about scoring, who does the scoring? I'm assuming, I've never taken a civil service test, so there's right and wrong answers, so anybody could score it and you end up with the same result. It doesn't have to be city staff. It could be
Actually, how it works with the civil service, when we say test, we kind of use the word test loosely. Oftentimes it's a questionnaire that is part of the process. And so it isn't just necessarily right or wrong answers. So no, it would depend on who's scoring it. But one of the things we do is that we always try to have at least, no matter again the position, at least 3 people scoring them. So to make sure there's not, for people to think, what if someone scores somebody really high or really low? By doing an average of at least 3 people, you tend to kind of, you're able to, how do I want to say, you don't have those outstanding scores that might really throw something off. By using an average, you hope that makes the process fair and equitable and all that.
So you're saying this is more of an essay type of answer as opposed to multiple choice, true, false, that sort of thing?
Correct. In this case, it was a questionnaire that was like an essay type.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yes, that's me.
Sorry. Go ahead, please.
When you look at the high quality staff that we have, I think that's pretty good obvious, or that our process works quite well.
Well, thank you. I will open for Mr. Salentic now, so I'll unmute you. Go ahead, Mr. Salentic.
Jeremy Salentic, 1008 Rockland Street. I was one of the people that did have a question about the yard camping, and it's good to know that I wasn't a criminal all last summer when I camped out every Friday night in the driveway with the boys. But the reason why I asked that question specifically was because of the fact that the campgrounds are closed by, an order from the governor, and I wanted to make sure that private camping on my own property wasn't included in that, which I don't know why it would be, because you're socially distanced from your neighbors and so on and so forth. But that was the reason why I had that question initially. And now there's something else I brought up quite some time ago that frustrated me. And I never got an answer as to whether or not anything's going to be done about it, is when they moved the public when they moved the city council meetings over to YouTube, they only backdated it to, I believe, January of 2018. And then when you want to get a copy of a previous meeting prior to that, you got to pay the city $10 to get a copy of it. And, it's not $10 for a DVD full of them. It's $10 for each meeting that you want a copy of. And, the city staff are already paid, whoever's in that department of recording and everything are already paid to do that. So I don't know why they can't take some time and just upload those videos. I'm sure that they're stored someplace on a hard drive and can just be uploaded to the YouTube channel, or to make them available the old way where you had to go to the city website and watch them, but you could still review those videos of those previous city council meetings. So I never did get an answer to that about whether they were considering that or not. And then on a lighter note, I see a beautiful picture behind Mr. Gaines, and I'm wondering if that's available in a print, because I sure do love that old Melon Arch Bridge over Center Street there. That's all I got for you guys.
All right, thank you, Mr. Salentic. For the YouTube question, I certainly will open that up. If we have any plans current plans to take some of the archived videos and put them on YouTube, is that the case yet, or would you need more resources to do that?
At this point, quite honestly, it really hasn't been one of our priorities to do that. It wasn't necessarily that we didn't have an interest to do it. It was just, again, really how do we prioritize the time that we're going to take to do that. And again, back to the question about a meeting, I understand about making a public record request and that city staff are paid. However, there is still time and effort to go into doing that. And so, charging for public record requests is allowed under Iowa code.
Thank you. And was there another? Okay, so
what about that print?
The print, yes.
I can't believe that.
The print that's behind me is actually on loan from, it's a Don Page, a Cedar Falls artist, and the print itself is on loan from the First Center's collection.
Yeah, so for Mr. Splendid, contact the Hearst Center might be your best first bet for reaching out to the artist in order to possibly get a print. So thanks for the question, and thanks for the art appreciation. I will open for Ms. Dunn. So Kelly Dunn, I'm going to unmute you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, so first, just real quick, I just want to thank you guys for the discussion on the preparation and the safety for our city for the COVID pandemic. I was going to kind of bring that up, and you guys covered it all. I am appreciative to be able to still get outside with my family, but I do, as a nurse, hope that we are making sure people are doing that safely. One of the things that I notice, a lot of times I get off between 4 and 5, and those are very, very busy times on the trails between Prairie Parkway and my house. So I usually choose not to get on the trails during that time. I usually bike on the streets, or I noticed today, or it was this weekend, that Cedar Valley cyclists put a really good post on as to how to practice safe social distancing when you're biking or on the recreational trails. And I would highly encourage everybody to take a look at that. It was a great resource as far as when you are running or biking, or if you cough, there are particles of your saliva that hang out in an area for a certain amount of time. So check out that resource. Lastly, and I think you guys already kind of touched on it, but as a nurse, I do hope that we practice patience and listen to science when there's any talk about reopening our city. In the meantime, I encourage all citizens to patronize and support our local businesses who have adapted, and we can still support them safely. And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn. I will call on next Moto G7 Power. So if you could give your name and address for the record, please.
I'm still getting used to this. Can you hear me?
We hear you just fine, Moto G7 Power. Name and address for the record, please.
Minette Bell, 2508 Union Road. And I'm very, very confused. I'm just not used to this thing that we're doing now with the TV, but it's like it's all over the map. We were talking about grass and how high it has to be and then getting fined, and then going to the coronavirus, and then talking about who's going to be, PSO and who's not going to be PSO. And then, like Kelly just said, she went biking, and, there's all these different viruses and, droppings and whatever. Well, she's a nurse. Stay at home. That's what we're being told to do, is stay at home. So when all this stuff is supposed to be rushed, why can't it wait a little while? It seems like everything is in such a hurry, and everybody's told, you're at home, I'm at home, we're all told to stay at home and not go anywhere, but evidently all this stuff needs to be done so soon with the grass mowing. And, if they don't mow their grass after a first time, wouldn't they think, well, I don't want to get a $500 fine. I sure as hell don't want to get a $1,000 fine. So they hire somebody else to do it rather than the city. It seems to me like it's just this whole TV thing is very awkward to me. And maybe it's just me, but it goes from one subject to the next, and it's confusing. But I actually kind of enjoy it.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. I can say the items that we went through did follow the agenda that was published on Friday. And so we're just walking through those items one by one. Sometimes we get a little involved in a topic, and it's my job to try to keep us on track, but some excellent discussion tonight. So that's just how we run a council meeting. I'll open it for, say, I have 319-231-5209. So I'll open that up for you to speak if you would like.
Yes, sir. It's Rick Sharp, 1623 Burt Street, Cedar Falls again.
Okay.
First off, I want to thank
on the employee topics.
What's that? Oh yeah, no. I wanted to thank you and Council Members Miller and Council Member Tabor, as well as Attorney Rogers, to kind of spell out what I was allowed and not allowed to talk about. I appreciate that. I can learn from that. Second thing, hey, congratulations, Chief Bostwick, 40 years. That's a good long run. Thirdly, I guess what Director Gaines is talking about, the potential for financial or budget issues. I'm hoping there's a way that if we need the extra money, if there's a way that the city can look into withdrawing more from the industrial park TIF district to kind of help defray those increases or the declines in revenues. And finally, I hope someone in the city can take action on this. If they can work with the school district, and I've seen a lot of communities around the state, they're actually putting up little banners or flags with the pictures of the seniors, the senior class around like the poles, the light poles around the town. I know the high school already probably has a majority, if not all, the senior pictures, because usually those are turned in at the beginning of the school year for the yearbook. I think if the city can reach out to the school district, work with somebody, and like have a plan in place by the May 4th council meeting, even if the city chips in some money, whatever, to find a way to honor these seniors in the same way, either by putting up additional posts or trying to do something downtown on Main Street. I know we probably have a large senior class to take care of that, or all the way up and down University Avenue. I think that would be a really cool thing to do to recognize this class, and I'd hope that the city can look into it. And I think since graduation is probably mid-May, we could work together and get that accomplished. That's all I have. Thanks for staying up late, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. I'll note I have been talking with Dr. Petit at the school district. We looked at ideas of potentially having banners, like what it would take to have banners up for the senior athletes, because I've seen that done in some cities. Part of the problem with Cedar Falls is just the number of banners that are available for the number of students. We certainly would be open for ideas for how to celebrate, like how tonight we approved wheat pasting murals for UNI graduates up on College Hill. Certainly be open to ideas like that for downtown or for elsewhere in the city to celebrate our seniors who are now the quarantines, as they're called, to be able to recognize the fact that they're going through a major new stage in their life. They do have the ability for houses to purchase individual yard signs saying that they have a senior at that property. If there are other ideas within the city level, certainly open to look at that as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Penny Pop, who I now am unmuting. So welcome, Ms. Pop. And name and address for the record, if you're still there.
Still here, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Council, Mayor, Penny Pop, 4805 South Main. I just wanted to say thank you to the Cedar Trails Partnership. The South Main and Green Hill Corridor Neighborhood Association received a grant for a bike repair station at El Dorado Park. It's on order, and we appreciate the city in helping us install it. So bike by and look for the new bike repair station later on this summer. Thanks a lot for your time.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Pop. And seeing no other people tonight, since speakers have one opportunity, I believe that is the end of public comment. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Been motioned. It's been second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're done. Thank you very much, everybody. Look forward to seeing you around town. Be safe. Wash those hands.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.